Well, I will give you a tip. Here's a pro tip. Put up your posters with those 3M strips, and after a year or two, they'll start to fall off your walls and scare the shit out of you. Let the posters make the decision when they're ready to come down.
Kind of reminds me of like when I was in my teens. I used to hang posters of girls on my ceiling and using sticky tack. And that was the scary thing too, is in the middle of the night, you hear it rip off the ceiling and just fall on you. Numerous times that has scared the shit out of me at night, middle of the night.
And that stick tack, it left like an oily residue when it was finished. So like you had the corners that you could only put the stick tack because you couldn't put it in the middle of the poster. It would like oil itself through.
Right.
I too had a poster on my ceiling. It was just Jeff Gordon because he was so handsome. He was the Ben Solo of my day.
See, you said Jeff, and I immediately thought Goldblum, and it did not go Goldblum, and I was very surprised there.
I went through a NASCAR phase. Try doing that in an all-girls school. It was interesting.
Hello and welcome to another episode of Bry Guy and his Super Friends. I'm your host, Brian Labick. Joining me for this episode from what feels like a galaxy far, far away, Paula Miller.
Hello. Raylo is my halo. I didn't forget.
I figured. I didn't know if I should set you up for that or if you just take it, but you got it. It's like riding a bike.
Exactly.
Yeah, it's been a while. I should have done my homework and like went back and seen when the last time you were on. It had to have been like
February.
What did we talk about in February?
I don't know.
Like, I want to ballpark that it's probably like the Rise of Skywalker stuff, somewhere around there. I don't know if we've talked about anything since then, Star Wars, because it had to have been a Star Wars episode, right?
Or...
Oh, no, wait, were you on one of the countdowns, the top 10s and stuff?
Yeah.
It had to have been, I guess if it was in February, probably some of our favorites from the previous year, back when we could see movies in theaters.
I think so, because I don't think anything big came out in February, right?
That might have been the last month we actually had some decent stuff, but I can't remember what exactly. I feel like one of the last movies I saw in the theater, which was around February, was probably Sonic, but I don't think you and I probably talked about Sonic on the show.
No. I know Aaron and I went to a movie, but I don't know what it was.
It seems like decades ago at this point.
Cinemark might know.
Yeah.
The Cinemark app will probably know.
All right, so for this episode, we've got a slightly different format since I'm kind of making this up as we go. The thought for this episode, which sort of actually came from a conversation with Josh as him and I were texting, was basically to see what Paula thought about a very specific episode of The Mandalorian. Now, with that being said, Josh's idea, I wanted to include him since it was sort of his idea, include him in the discussion. Due to some scheduling conflicts, I can't get Josh and Paula to record at the same time. So we've done episodes like that in the past where I've had to split up recordings. Normally we record the first guest and then I'll record the second guest and sort of just paste those two conversations together. Technically that's still happening. What would be a little bit different this time is that after Paula and I have our conversation, I'm going to send our conversation to Josh. He's going to listen to it before him and I talk, and then when him and I sit down, he'll have a few other talking points he can chime in, hopefully from the previous conversation, hopefully to feel a little bit more cohesive and give you an idea of, I don't know, in my mind, hopefully be a little bit more seamless as far as what we're trying to talk about today. Josh kind of suggested it was sort of more like a late night talk show vibe, subbing out guests here and there. So I'm hoping that's the feel for it, and we'll see how that goes.
Don't let me down, Josh.
Yeah. But I guess, Paula, if you want to know what Josh thinks, you'll just have to listen to the episode afterwards.
I always want to know what Josh thinks.
There you go, Josh. You've got one fan. So, with this being the case, I could have waited for schedules to align. But in the back of my mind, I'm also feel like we're kind of pressed for time because I also wanted to record this before the next episode of Mandalorian is released. Plus, I think there's enough to dive into after this most recent episode that, this could hold us for a while. I wanted to save some material for later because I'm sure we will do a wrap up to season 2, and at that point I'll try to get hopefully the whole crew together so we can talk. And Paula, you're obviously invited back if we can schedule that.
I would
around
love
your
to be
schedule.
back.
So we'll see if probably at this point it's going to end up being because the season wraps right before Christmas, right? I think.
Yes.
So I know that's probably prime time for you to be busy with work. So we'll have to see what we can figure out. But
Work, schmirk. This is so more important. Ahsoka.
So yeah, we'll figure that out, closer to the end of the season and see what we can figure out. As far as this one, with smaller one-on-one conversations, the guests will be limited, I guess. In my mind, this could be a smaller episode, shorter in time, but it's Star Wars, so who the hell knows? We could still end up talking for 2 hours. If this fits the bill, well, either way, because it's the only name I have for this sort of thing. I'm going to call this a mini Mando episode just because I like the way that sounds.
Oh.
So if this fits the bill, hopefully we can keep it a little bit shorter. We'll see where we go. But I think it's enough setup. So I'm going to throw out the spoiler alert for this episode. So for anyone that isn't currently caught up on The Mandalorian, which is up through, what is this, chapter 13?
I believe so, yes.
So this is the 5th episode of season 2. That's what we've watched. That's what we're going to talk about currently. So the last episode that aired that we have seen up to this point is titled The Jedi. So keep in mind, this by the time this comes out, it'll be after the next episode is out. So chapter 14 will probably be out by the time this is uploaded. So we're not going to talk about anything on that show. We recorded this before that on purpose. I don't want to get distracted by that episode. I want to focus on sort of what we have so far. And along with The Mandalorian, I'm sure we will be talking about Rebels and Clone Wars over the course of this discussion. So spoiler alert for those shows also. Paul and I have watched all of that stuff, so we are well versed. We were sort of talking before this. If you haven't watched that stuff, for the love of God, if you're watching The Mandalorian, go watch the Clone Wars and Rebels on Disney Plus. It's all in the service you're paying for already.
Brian had to calm me down. He had to calm me down.
I'm sure we'll have to do that a couple times during the course of this episode. So yeah, that's our big PSA. Be sure to check out those series while you can. Other than that, spoilers to follow. And this is your last call. If you're gonna keep listening, then you're gonna get all the stuff.
Wee-oo, spoiler! Wee-oo, spoiler! Something like that.
All right, so we are free to talk about whatever the hell we want to talk about. So, I'm just gonna try to lead us in here. For anyone that's listened to past Star Wars episodes that have featured Paula, I think 2 things should be very clear: her love for Reylo, and her love for Ahsoka.
That defines me. Yes. It is who I am.
So we're going to start there. Chapter 13 officially introduced us to a live-action Ahsoka Tano, played by Rosario Dawson. For you, the biggest Ahsoka fan that I know, how high were your expectations for this live-action Ahsoka, and what did you think?
So I'm a big spoiler fan. Like I'm okay with spoilers. It's okay if I know things
I don't
ahead of time.
understand it. It's blasphemous.
Surprises don't. I don't know. They don't do it for me. So I was on Twitter that morning, and I kind of knew who was going to be playing Ahsoka. And to be honest, I had read the rumors already. So the rumors had been flying around for a while.
Yeah.
So I was absolutely okay with that. I think she did an amazing job. Rosario Dawson looked amazing. She acted great. She studied Ahsoka. I couldn't be happier. If Ashley was playing her, that would have only been, acceptable. So, I mean, she looks the part.
I think they did a good job with her makeup and costume and stuff. I think she did look really cool.
And for anyone who hasn't read the Vanity Fair article, I know, Brian, you've read it. There's a lot of information that they had put in there about making sure that the makeup was right and, Rosario actually getting the role, and it was fan casted, which I was really excited to know. Like, she was reading the fans' comments on Twitter, and she's like, yeah, that would be amazing. And Dave Filoni saw it too, and he's like, yeah, that would be amazing. Went to Jon Favreau, and he's like, I know her. And that's how she got cast as Ahsoka. And, fans do hold some power. We don't think that we do sometimes. I mean, sometimes we just go on to those platforms to complain or to share articles and to find out that she was actually fan casted was amazing, because we all agreed she looked the part. We already know she's an amazing actress, so you put all that together, and we couldn't. I mean, most of the fans that I've on Twitter reading all of that were just as happy as I was.
Right. And I actually made a point about this because I wanted to bring this point, because I think what you sort of talked about, I think, is a larger issue that I'm not sure how I feel about it, and it's the fan casting thing. Like, because we'll probably come back around to this over the course of the discussion. I liked Rosario. I think my hope was that somehow they would incorporate something for Ashley's performance, or even try to dub her voice. Even as hard as that would be, I still held out hope until she talked that we would hear Ashley come out of her mouth.
Right.
So I think I'm still a little bit disappointed that we didn't get some of Ashley in the Like, I think mannerisms and stuff there that, they get through animation, and maybe the way she delivers some lines, she tried to deliver like Ashley, but after having years of Ashley Eckstein as Ahsoka, it's very hard for me to break that off from the character. And the whole fan casting thing got me thinking, like, if the internet has that type of control or approval to suggest that, and it goes through the right channels, gets to the right person, and then by the time it hits Dave, he's like, yeah, you know what, that seems like a good idea. But would he have had that idea on his own, or is he seeing it because the internet's telling him to see it? It's an interesting way for people to get cast, and I'm not sure if I like it.
I wonder if it was just the stars aligned and
which could
that
be
magic happened, because
Yeah.
I don't hear that very often. But I don't read Vanity Fair articles very often either. So only when they pertain to Ahsoka Tano. Or on occasion Star Wars.
Yeah.
So I guess I don't know how often that happens. I know there's a lot in Star Wars that's very negative. There's a lot of negativity when it comes to like the current trilogies and the TV shows, Disney Plus, Kathleen Kennedy. I mean, that could be its own podcast. So
yeah, for sure. Yeah.
To see something positive come out of that is, really inspiring.
And that's fair too, because I feel like how your opinion on something like the fan casting would be how you accept the role. If you're okay with who they pick, then obviously everything's good. If you're still on the fence or not sure about it, then maybe that's where I'm coming from, is I'm still not 100% sold on it, that I'm still like almost looking for a way out. Like, well, it could have been this way, or maybe it should have been this way, but.
Or did they not give anybody else,
Right. Like, I almost feel like Ashley
would
have, I would have liked to know that they tried to give her an opportunity to do it, and for some reason it didn't work. And maybe it's just physical appearance, because Ashley's a tiny girl, and maybe they wanted Ahsoka to be a little bit taller and bigger to since she's more of an adult now. Had we had teenage Ahsoka, Ashley, I think, would be perfect for on-screen Ahsoka.
Right.
But yeah, I think it's just, I always just keep coming back to like spending that much time with Ahsoka and having Ashley voice her and give life to Ahsoka, and the fans, me particularly too, fell in love with that character through her, and it's still really hard for me to separate that, I think.
As a person who lives with rainbows and butterflies, because that's how I roll with positivity, I could have been really critical about this, because she is a character that's really near and dear to my heart.
Right.
So it's just a way of loving her differently. I can love the, animated series Ahsoka, and I can love, Rosaria's Ahsoka. I think she did it justice.
Yeah.
And, would I have preferred Ashley's voice? Probably. But I'm okay with the way it turned out. For somebody, like I said, I'm very rainbows and butterflies, unicorns, and cupcakes. So, somebody else a little bit more cynical might say, they didn't give other people a chance, or it could have been better this way. But I think for me, who loves Ahsoka Tano so much, I was absolutely thrilled with it.
And I think the other hand of it too, for me, is that 2 episodes before that we had Bo-Katan show up, and Katie Sackhoff got to reprise her role in live action. She voices the character in animation. So with that precedent, I feel like I held out hope that somehow Ashley was going to be in this in live action.
Right. And I feel like with Bo-Katan, like the voice actress resembles that character.
Fair, yeah.
And sometimes when they animate those people, they animate them, you know, as they're watching the videos or as they're watching the actor, you know, do those, you know. So, you know, that was great too. I was very pleased. And I know a lot of people who, oh, I know what show she was on. Battlestar Galactica.
Yes. Yeah.
We're happy to see her in a live action Star Wars role. So, no, I was very happy with that as well.
And I love that, like, Katie Sackhoff and Rosario, I think, are both, from what I can tell, very big Star Wars fans, too. So the fact that they get to be in here and play these characters in live action, like, that's fun for them, too.
Yes. And, you know, one of them didn't have to study at all because she was Bo-Katan. And
yeah.
The other one really put in the effort and work to make sure that she put forth the best performance she could to do that character justice.
Yeah. Well, let's spin back to Ahsoka. So, I don't know about you, but that episode, when that opens and you see her within the first, like, 10 seconds, that blew my mind. Just that. I thought they were going to slowly reveal that, or she'd be, like, the tag at the end of the episode. The fact that she was just in it from the beginning, yes. I was like, all right, this is great.
Well, I think, like, the more, when I thought about that, with, you know, this being Dave Filoni's episode, he's going to put her there as much as possible. So, Dave is my king.
Yeah, true that.
Faithful subject. So, yes, all the Ahsoka, please.
Because I feel like I was... No, go ahead.
No, I was saying we really didn't need the other, like, the Mando story part of it. We just needed to see Ahsoka fighting. It reminds me of when, like, Vader in Rogue One came out and he's like, you know, killing everybody with his lightsabers, and you're like, yeah, I could watch a whole movie of that. That's how I felt with Ahsoka. I'm like, I could just watch a movie of her just slinging people around and lightsabers going everywhere.
And the fact that there was so much of her in this episode makes me wonder if this is like a backdoor pilot for like a series that they're going to do with her. I feel like you don't cast Rosario Dawson for this role in live action and use her once.
Right. That's the Twitter rumors I'm hearing. Because I know there's Twitter rumors about the Boba Fett spinoff.
I saw that too. Yeah.
Yeah. Now the Ahsoka Tano spinoff. And I know I was saying this, you know, you asked me how I felt about this episode, and I said, well, I am very happy that we have a live action Ahsoka Tano, but I also feel like I might have been teased and we might not see her again.
Yeah.
I mean, we only have a couple more episodes. It's called The Mandalorian. It's not called The Mandalorian and the leftover rebels crew. So I don't know, you know, are we going to see her in the future, you know, series? Are we going to see her in the future Mandalorian season 3? I hope this isn't the end, and I hope it wasn't just a one-time thing. So
yeah,
you know, I love rumors.
I think given those options, I would much rather see her in her own show. Because like you said, this is called The Mandalorian. I think putting, as much as I love Star Wars lore and getting the larger story, I don't think I like the idea of Mando and now Grogu being caught up in the larger Star Wars story. I kind of thought that this was going to be like a side story. They're in the galaxy doing their own thing, peripherally seeing stuff that's going on to the larger universe. Once all these larger universe characters start popping up, it makes the galaxy feel smaller, which I'm not sure if I like. So the cameos are one thing, but if they keep reoccurring, I think that's going to really distract from Mando's story and what they're trying to do there. So if we're going to see more of Ahsoka, I definitely want a whole new series with her. I think I'd be on board with that for sure.
Because I feel, when I was telling Aaron, my husband, I said, you know, I feel like this is live action Rebels at the moment this season.
Yes.
I mean, we're getting a lot of that tie-in, but that's okay because, like, we wanted more. And if people can't appreciate an animated series like Rebels, but they can appreciate this live action show, then maybe that's what we need to tie in to Rebels to get people to watch that show. And that's okay with me too. So bring it. You know.
Yeah, so maybe that's a good point. Because between Ahsoka, the name drop at the end of this episode, which was blew my mind too, hearing Grand Admiral Thrawn being named in live action to me
Mm-hmm.
was fucking amazing. So now I'm curious if we're even going to see him in live action, which will also blow my mind. But, these are big names for people that follow the lore and the animated series and stuff like that. For anyone that hasn't, you hear this stuff come up and you're like, well, who the hell's that? But maybe it will interest you enough to go back and watch this stuff. So if you're curious to learn more about Ahsoka and Grand Admiral Thrawn, as much as I want to say just go into Rebels because that's where they're both at, I would much prefer you go back and watch Clone Wars to build up Ahsoka before you get to Rebels. That's still the proper way to do it. But you're also looking at 11 seasons of animated television somewhere in there?
What else do people have to do right now, Brian?
True. Very true.
Sit around in your jammies and watch some Clone Wars. It's good food.
Yes.
Good food.
Now's the time.
Mm-hmm. Before people have to actually go back to work and be members of society, and then we have, things to do again and people to see. Stay home, stay safe, watch Clone Wars.
Yeah. That's the holiday mantra.
Exactly.
You brought it up, I think, too, with this episode and Dave having a hand in it. Feel like I was texting a buddy of mine when we were talking about the possibility of, because Ahsoka gets name dropped in the Bo-Katan episode.
Right.
So then 2 weeks ago, you're already, at least me and my buddy were texting, trying to figure out, okay, is Ahsoka actually going to show up? How soon will we see her? Are they going to just tease her until the end of the season? And even when she shows up, is it just going to be like a quick glimpse of her and then she's gone? What are we going to get? And I think when I was talking to him, I had said, if she shows up in an episode, I would hope to hell that is Dave Filoni involved in this, written, directed, everything by him, because he has such a close connection to Ahsoka. He helped create her for the Clone Wars and all that stuff. So I was very happy to see that he wrote and directed her episode. That was very fitting to me. And I thought he did a friggin' excellent job directing this episode.
I agree. It was, everything that, and from that Vanity Fair article, from what I understand, George Lucas was on set for a minute. And, it had that old Western samurai vibe to it. And it was just, visually, it was beautiful. In the forest of, burnt trees. And it was just, visually, it was beautiful. It was a storyline that flowed. I mean, it was 47 minutes, and I felt like it was 5.
Oh, yeah.
It was just so good, and it just, when something's that good, it just tends to go really fast, and the storyline was intriguing, and, we got a little shootout at the end, which was pretty awesome. But yeah, I definitely commend Dave for his episode.
The way those... it's got the same sound effects from Rebels, her lightsabers, which I love, because they sound so unique compared to the other sabers we've seen in the series in Star Wars, period. And like you said, the smoky charred forest with her bright white lightsabers cutting through the fog, and the way she disappeared, the way they shot all that stuff in the beginning. Oh, I loved it so much. And her sneaking around like Batman around people, and that was awesome. Yeah, there's so much to point out. And
the final scene with, and I am so sorry, I was trying to find the name of the actress that she battles at the end. The boss battle at the end.
Oh yes. I sadly don't know her name either.
It was choreographed so well.
Yes.
And I'm like, wait a minute, she's gonna go against Ahsoka? What? And then she has the Beskar staff and spear, and I'm like, oh shit, this is gonna be something. And it was.
Yeah.
Edge of my seat. So good.
And I love that we finally got to see.
Watch a whole movie of that.
I love that we finally got to see too what Beskar can do against a lightsaber.
Yes. Oh, I thought that too. I'm like, wait a minute, is this gonna stop a lightsaber? And it totally does.
And that's completely why Mandalorians were a formidable adversary for the Jedi, because their armor can withstand that kind of stuff. So, yeah, that was even just seeing, even Mando and her facing off when they first meet for that quick little bit was enough to be like, oh, this is what, a Mando versus a Jedi fight could be, and this is fucking awesome.
It was. They became friends very quickly. And
I mean, when you're rolling around with Grogu...
Yeah, that's true.
It's hard to try to fight each other. It's very distractible.
Grogu. I'll get there.
Yeah, we got to go with that because we finally
Yeah.
get the name for Baby Yoda in this episode. How do you feel about the name?
Somebody asked me that same question, and I said, well, what kind of a name is Yoda either? So, it is what it is.
It's
We
very
love
it fits
Yoda.
Star Wars.
Yeah. And, when I believe it was when Ahsoka was talking about Yoda, and they played Yoda's theme
Yes.
in the
Yes.
background. So poor Yaddle. Sorry, Yaddle.
I seen that. There was a meme somewhere of like, you forgot about me or something like that. Like, I can't remember what the meme was, but yeah, there was one of those.
Yaddle's face when she hears that Ahsoka said she only knows of one other of that kind. Now, I know that there were rumors that we were actually going to find out about the species. So I still have high hopes about that. But then they threw down the name of the planet that they have to go to now to take Grogu to
For the
this
next
planet.
one. Okay.
Yes. Gosh darn it, I should have done my homework. It starts with a T, does it not?
I completely meant to rewatch the episode before we did this,
Yeah.
and I still haven't got to it yet. So the name is slipping my mind also.
So I went to Wikipedia.
Yep.
That's what Star Wars people do. And apparently it is the planet where the Jedi were first created.
Yeah, okay.
So it is the planet, the place. So I have lots of speculations about that as well. But that's where he has to take little Grogu.
Well, let's spin there because I do have a question because she mentioned Mando taking Grogu there to access an old Jedi temple to sort of decide his destiny, his fate. And she even mentioned specifically that if he does this, a Jedi could come looking for him. Do you think she has someone in mind, or is that just general, there's got to be Jedi out there, somebody will come for him? Or do you think she's thinking of someone specific? And if it's someone specific, who do you think it could be?
So I think it's too soon for Luke Skywalker to have started training. That's just a personal opinion. See, that's just a personal opinion. It's so soon after the fall of the Empire. Could it possibly be? I don't know.
I would assume at this point, this is in my own personal headcanon, I guess.
Yeah.
That it's 5 years-ish after Return of the Jedi.
Okay.
So I would think Luke is starting to lay the groundwork for that. Whether it's just like going to find students, or if he's picking a place to start the temple, so then when he gathers students, he has a place to put them. I think it could be any combination of that, because we still don't really know when the temple goes to shit. Like, we know he was training Ben, and they had a falling out, and Ben torches the place, but we don't know if that was 15 years after Return of the Jedi. We don't know if that was 20 years, 25. Like, we don't know what the time frame is there.
Right. So this was probably, in my mind, the way I'm thinking about it, is that it's, not soon after the fall of the Empire, because you don't have the First Order yet, and he could possibly be, starting his temple. This is a way for him to come back. Everyone's like, Sebastian Stan should play young Luke Skywalker.
I saw that fan casting too.
I'm okay with that. We've been saying that for a while now. It could be him. Everyone's like, Mace Windu's alive. I don't think Mace Windu is alive, but that's a possibility. We don't know who survived Order 66, and that's what's really cool about Star Wars, is it can create all this shit.
Yeah.
They could say, hey, little Grogu survived. Who else is alive?
I did see the meme of like the screenshot of Revenge of the Sith when Anakin ignites the lightsaber in the room with all the younglings, and then there's Grogu peeking over the chair. Like, I've been here the whole time.
I mean, who saved him?
Right. That's the other question too.
Was there a toddler time room for those kids? Where there's different ages in there? So we don't know how many how many rooms Anakin went to, or who survived, or
he only hit the 5 to 10 range. He forgot he didn't go to the room that was 40 and over.
Babies, who knows? That's the cool thing, is that we have all these crazy speculations about who saved him, or did he save himself, or what Jedi are alive, or maybe not quite Jedi, maybe just people with, force sensitivity. Who knows? Who's still on that planet?
Yeah.
We don't know.
So in the whole speculation sphere, like if we get Luke, would you like to see another actor portray like a younger Luke, or do you think they should do Mark Hamill but like de-age him?
I mean, so Solo,
Yeah.
with Han Solo,
Yeah.
Aiden, whose last name I
Enright?
can't remember. Yes, that sounds right.
Yeah.
I mean, there were times when he did look like, if you squinted, Harrison Ford. Like it's a very delicate thing. And, when they did, at the end of Rogue One, when they had Leia or,
Tarkin was in there too.
yeah. So, I mean, they could do so much with CGI. I just don't know if I want them to do that. If we could get Sebastian Stan on board, we're okay with that.
I mean, there's all kinds of like deep fake videos now, which I don't know what goes into a like deep fake software, but because everyone is doing it, I feel like it's either really cheap or really easy to do.
Yeah.
And it looks good. Like, I think that could pass if they did something like that.
I would absolutely be okay with that. Like, let's take advantage of Mark Hamill while he's alive.
Yes, please.
I mean, I know he's not like super old, but like,
He obviously wanted to do more with Luke, and I think he was still, regardless of what he says, I think he's still a little bit disappointed of what he had to do with Luke in Last Jedi.
Yeah.
So give him another go-round of Luke, and let him have a little bit more of a send-off for that character or something. Just another chance to portray what maybe he thinks Luke should be.
And I think we would love a story about what happens with Luke in that time frame, too. Hey, another spinoff? Sure.
Yeah.
Give me
I'm all for it.
Spinoffs. And then I want these people who hate on Disney and Disney Plus to shut the fuck up, because we're getting some good shit. So stop hating on Kathleen Kennedy. Leave her alone. Send her flowers and chocolates. We have the Mandalorian now.
Well, if you talk to those people, they don't think it's Kathleen Kennedy's doing. They're going to put all the goodwill and celebration on Favreau and Filoni. They don't even think she's part of the picture.
Yeah. Okay. She's quietly sitting back, counting those stock options.
I know. I will defend her, too.
Yeah.
I think she's doing a great job.
Yeah. And I'd be fine with all the spinoffs. Like, Disney has it now. We've waited, 20 years for more Star Wars content. Now it's being rammed down my throat, and I'm okay with it. I am ready to choke on all the Star Wars stuff. Give me the
There's the quote.
Give me the Mando.
Put that on the poster.
I
am ready to choke on all the Star Wars. Yeah, I think, I don't think they have a clear idea what to do with the movies. So if they want to experiment with spin-off series and limited mini-series or whatever they want to do on Disney Plus, I think that's definitely the place to do it. Mm-hmm. So I'm with you. Give me whatever you want to create for this service, and I will watch it.
And I think the problem is the waiting. I am an impatient person. And it's like, well, Paula, you waited 20 years for all of this Star Wars content. Yes, well, now I want more. Now they've teased me. And now they're like, look, it's Ahsoka, and she's a real girl. She's Pinocchio. And I'm like, oh, that's great. What episode? Can I have some more, please, sir? Please, sir, can I have some more? Yes, I think that's my problem now, is that I'm getting spoiled.
See, I do like this, like, back to waiting a week. Like, granted, in between seasons, it's a really, months to a year before we see more Star Wars. But even the episodic nature of the series, having a week in between episodes, I kind of like that, because it lets us do these type of conversations where we can speculate each week to see what's coming up and what's going to happen next. That's sort of the fun water cooler type of conversations that TV used to do until Netflix came around. And then it's like, you try to talk to someone who's watching something on Netflix, and it's like, well, wait, how far in are you? You're 5 in. I'm only 3 in, so we can't talk yet.
And I'm absolutely okay with that. I've never been the type of person to sit down and binge watch 30 episodes at a time. I don't have time for that. I do have time for a 30 to 40 minute episode once a week.
Right. Yeah.
And that I'm fine with it. And then I get on Twitter and I see what everyone else is saying.
There's your water cooler. Yeah. Twitter is the water cooler.
I get up in the morning, I take my morning constitutional, I sit on the toilet and I read Twitter. How it rolls. Isn't that what America does?
You've got a schedule, damn it.
I do, and I'm very regular. You're welcome, everyone.
Yeah, more details than anyone wanted to know for this show.
So welcome. I wouldn't be me if I didn't talk about poop.
That's fair.
So,
that's fair.
Yes, thank you. But I really have enjoyed this season and the Rebels tie-ins. I wish. I mean, we saw a little bit about what looked like pickled Snokes in the background. Did you see those? Was that this episode or was it last episode?
That was
oh crap.
the one before that.
Okay,
That was
I'm sorry.
that was after Bo-Katan, in between Ahsoka. Yeah, because it was
Okay.
he flew off of that planet with a wrecked ship and then had to stop off with Grief and why can't I think of Gina Carano's character's name?
Oh, what the hell?
I am completely blanking.
Cara Dune.
Yes. He stopped off with them to raid the base, and that's at the end of that when they were in there, that's when they saw the
pickled
people in the tubes. I guess we could assume those are clones. That's my best guess.
Mm-hmm.
But I didn't like freeze frame on the shots or anything to try to get a good look at what they were doing. But the one thing I missed when I watched it, but I think sort of reading up and checking stuff out after the fact, was during that episode when they raid the science facility and they're listening to the hologram from the scientists. When he's talking about the child, he talks about the highest M count, which is the closest thing we're getting to midi-chlorians mentioned in anything that's not a prequel. So that little nod was fun, I think. Which
definitely,
if you go back to Star Wars lore-wise, go back to Revenge of the Sith, when Sidious sits down with Anakin to talk about the legend of Darth Plagueis and how he could manipulate the midi-chlorians in a being to create life. So if this science experiment is messing around with some type of possible clones and they're looking for things with high M counts, I think it's fair to assume they are trying to create life or give life to these clones by taking blood from Grogu.
So my concern now is when they take him to this planet and put him at this, this Jedi temple, hopefully the right people come along. I mean, you don't know who's going to get this message.
Well, the ship is still being tracked.
Oh, that's right.
They have yet to pay that off.
Yes.
So shit's going to hit the fan at some point.
Right. So they're looking for the child so they can, what we're thinking, create these clones. I don't know
what we don't know,
track.
Like, I feel like the internet is speculating it must be Snoke, because those are the only clones we know about. But they could be clones for anybody. They could be a clone army. They could be
Palpy.
A clone of someone else. Yeah, a clone of someone else important. Who knows? It doesn't have to be Snoke, I don't think.
I just like saying pickled Snoke.
Pickled anything is good, right?
Exactly. It's a delicacy.
But again, like that could, it's, again, hit or miss for me, where I like learning the lore of what's going on in the universe. But again, having this guy stumble through, like having Mando sort of stumble through and accidentally find himself getting caught up in the larger plan for the universe and what we know is coming. I don't know if I want that. It's because, again, I don't know. It's a fine line, I guess.
I wonder how far they're going to go with, Baby Yoda's storyline.
Yeah.
Like, is this, I've seen the merchandise and it's like a clan of two is, what shopdisney.com is selling. So how long is this going to go for? Like, it's obvious, when Ahsoka says there's an attachment there and that can, be a good or bad thing. She's seen it before. Anakin. Oh, sorry. I had a Grogu in my throat.
Too much Star Wars down there.
Too much Star Wars. I'm choking on Star Wars. But no, really, how far are they, is this what The Mandalorian is? Is it the story of him and Grogu together forever?
Yeah.
Besties. Is he going to raise him? Is he going to take them, to the temple? I mean, I don't even think they know. Well, they probably know the story or where it's going to go. But, the sky's the limit.
I have a theory it's a lot of conjecture, but I think it's a question I've been wanting to ask you, and I wanted to do it on the podcast because I'm curious how you're going to spin this. So, given I'm trying to figure out how to do this without like burying the lead. So again, we've sort of just talking about Ahsoka tells Mando take him to the Jedi Temple to see if another Jedi will come along to train him and sort of take him under their wing.
Right.
So let's assume that the Jedi that comes up and finds him is Luke Skywalker. Luke Skywalker is recruiting for his Jedi Temple. So at that point, Luke takes Grogu to the Jedi Temple. Now we know the ultimate fate of the Jedi Temple, which is Ben Solo loses his mind and kills everybody. What if we follow that to its conclusion and Ben Solo is the one to kill Grogu at the temple? How will you react to that revelation?
How am I going to feel? I don't know. I mean, he has his reasons.
Already he's justified. It's done.
I mean,
he can do no wrong.
He got a Snoke and a Palpatine in his head, and Grandpa's in there too. I would have a hard time sorting my feelings out as well. So, my dad's never home. My mom's a politician. I mean, my uncle tried to kill me. I think I might lose it too. I mean,
So that gives him the excuse to kill the cutest thing in Star Wars, like, ever.
Way to put me on the spot.
That's why I wanted to do it while we were recording.
Yeah.
It's going to be on record.
At that point in time, we got another 20 years. We're looking at like, I don't know. You know how, saucy Teen Groot was? Just imagine Teen Grogu, and he's starting to talk now. He's got his sass. I mean, he probably had it coming. So
you're still siding with Ben Solo. He can do no wrong.
Yes.
Okay. I just wanted to set the record straight on that hypothetical scenario.
When we started podcasting today, there was two things that define me. Reylo and Ahsoka. This should not be a surprise.
I thought about putting your love for Grogu in there too, because I know, your Baby Yoda merch and the stuff that you've looked at for Baby Yoda stuff, I think has been up there too. So I know he's high on your list also.
I'm not a big fan of children. But when it's green with big ears and squeaks, then, my cold, dead heart melts a little bit, comes alive, and I get a beat or two.
Your heart grew 5 sizes that day.
It did. I mean, he's an escape artist. I'm guessing he fled the scene again. That's the story I'm
with. You could definitely spin it. They could retcon that if they wanted to. If they retconned him in the Jedi Temple that he gets away from Order 66, then I think, he'll be fine.
So another thing is...
I'm just thinking, because ultimately, we don't know the fate of Grogu.
Right.
So by the time we get to 30 years out or 35 years out, when we get to Force Awakens, there are still, no Jedi around. So trying to follow the breadcrumbs, if Luke Skywalker had found Grogu and taken him to train him, you would think he would be a bigger presence in the galaxy when they need him. So did something happen to him before that? Did he never get trained? I feel like either he's dead, he's in hiding like Yoda, or he never got trained. I feel like those are our options.
I feel like the Jedi were very... The people who survived, we don't know who survived.
Right.
I mean, we know Kanan survived. His master did not. We don't know what, Jedi in training lived after Order 66. He was protected, and we're lucky enough that with Rebels we got to see kind of Kanan work through that and be able to train Ezra, because there's Force-sensitive people out there, but they're not being trained because Jedi are probably far and few between now.
Right.
So, when he's going to this temple that's, Mando is taking him, Din is taking him to, in this timeline, we don't know where Ezra is. Is it after, he gets sucked into space with his space whales and Grand Admiral Thrawn? Is it before?
It should be after, right? Because Reza was on my list of people to possibly show up if Grogu accesses the Jedi Temple. Because I feel like if we're getting name dropped for Grand Admiral Thrawn, then Ezra's got to be fair game too. Because at the end of Rebels, the two of them blast off, like you said, with the space whale.
Right.
And then the epilogue for Rebels is because Rebels takes place right before Episode 4, is the majority of the show.
Mm-hmm.
And then at the end of the show is sort of when the rebellion starts to get started. They have, it sort of bleeds into A New Hope and all that kind of stuff. And the epilogue that we see Sabine and Ahsoka setting off to find Ezra is Sabine's narration is talking about the Battle of Endor and how the Rebel Alliance won. So if Mando is 5 years after Return of the Jedi, Ahsoka and Ezra and Grand Admiral Thrawn are either missing for 5 years or they've popped back up in that 5-year gap.
Right.
Which, again, we don't know the answer to that question. But I almost feel like if Ahsoka's name-dropping Grand Admiral Thrawn like he's around and conducting business somewhere, he has to have survived and made it back from wherever he went to. And if he can do that, I'm going to assume Ezra can also do that. So the bigger question remains, did Ahsoka and Sabine find him? Why is Ahsoka not actively still looking for him? Or did she just leave the task up to Sabine because she had other stuff to take care of?
So maybe they split up thinking that, obviously, though I'm so ashamed I don't know the bad guy's name in this episode, but the woman who, was in charge of this town,
Right.
and obviously Ahsoka believes that she is working for Grand Admiral Thrawn. So how long has he been in power to have control of this woman? And where else does he have control? So is that possibly, Ahsoka's spin-off show is that, she's cleaning up the mess that is kind of out there that Thrawn has created in the midst of no empire. What role does he have in creating like the First Order?
Right.
When we come into The Force Awakens, like the First Order is already up and running and, creating Starkiller Base and what's the in-between and what does Thrawn have to do with it? And did I not read enough books to tell me that?
There are never enough books.
Right. I have not read any of the Thrawn books. Shame on me.
Well, I think the Thrawn books purposely take place outside of what we know from the animated series and stuff. Like, the ones that I have read have taken place well before his appearance in Rebels. So they're filling in the backstory and prequel-y stories to where we leave off. So I don't know if they've ever... I know there's more... I've read 2 of the 3 from the first Thrawn trilogy, and I know they're just kicking off another Thrawn trilogy. But I don't know where that second Thrawn trilogy takes place, if it's another prequel type story or if it's after all that stuff. That's where I'm still kind of fuzzy. But I mean, Thrawn is such a tactician that if he is somehow giving orders to the governor lady that was in charge,
Right.
there's got to be an ulterior motive to that. He's so calculated that there's got to be a good reason why this lady is reporting to him and what her ultimate goal is or what he's trying to accomplish.
Right.
Which,
and
again,
how many planets?
right?
Like what is his reach? So, and obviously he's in hiding, or Ahsoka would know where he is. So,
Yeah.
And in the end, does she get that information? I'm guessing that she does.
Yeah.
So yeah. Which means, going back to Ezra, who's Grogu going to reach out to? Who's going to answer his call? We don't know. It could be a Jedi. We don't know. It could be Ezra. It could be Leia. It could be Luke. We don't know. Not Kanan.
Tier.
Spoiler.
I also, the other thought that occurred to me for the temple is, what if it's just like a Force ghost?
Yes.
Like, what if we get Anakin or Yoda or, Obi-Wan or some Force ghost, somebody that would communicate with Grogu too. I think that would be a fun cameo too. But I don't know what's on the table. I feel like Frank Oz is the obvious choice. Like, have Force Ghost Yoda show up and talk to Grogu, being the same species and all. I think that's the best way to go.
I don't think they're going to do that again. That's just my opinion. We got him in the Last Jedi.
And I guess it makes less sense to have one of those characters for Grogu because they have no connection to him.
Right.
Unless like the only way it could work for Yoda, I would think, is if Yoda's the one that got him out of the temple.
I've also read that Grogu is the love child of Yoda and Yaddle.
Well, I mean, that's the obvious choice. The only two other species we've seen of that. So
Christmas miracle.
I mean, if Palpatine can have kids, obviously Yoda's going to be able to have kids. So what the hell?
Gross. So
Let's
gross.
just retcon it all. Screw it. Yoda's over there telling Anakin not to get married and have kids. You know, he does it himself. That's a big retcon if they do that.
That is my least favorite storyline in Star Wars, is that she is his granddaughter.
We're back to Rey and Palpatine type of thing?
I'm sorry.
Yes.
Yeah, that came out
No,
of
I
nowhere. That
agree.
was just, that's my like least favorite storyline. Okay.
It's
I'm
the
over
biggest
it.
retcon that ugh.
Yeah.
I have a problem with bringing up like Rise of Skywalker stuff because it starts making me visibly angry, and then I just go off on tangents about how much I don't like what they did with that movie.
Yeah. Except for the kiss. That was great. So let's talk about Mandalorian.
I know, I'm trying to go through my notes here and see if there's anything else that I want to touch on.
How am I doing so far, Josh? How am I doing?
He'll answer you in the next part.
Yeah. Josh, and he can, obviously, he has his own story, but isn't a huge Star Wars fan from my knowledge of him.
More or less, yeah, mediocre. Like, I think he's watched the movies, obviously. He's fine or has enjoyed them, but
Right.
he's never dived into it as much as we have or really cared that much to want to dive into all the other lore and series and stuff like that.
So my question to Josh is, will this inspire you to maybe, take a weekend and watch Rebels, or, maybe think about Clone Wars for someone who's never, experienced it, but now we have all this information in Mandalorian, is it inspiring to you as somebody outside of that information to go
Yeah, if the
in?
breadcrumbs they're laying are enough to follow them to where they come from.
Exactly.
Well, that's a question I'll make sure he answers whenever we sit down with him
Thanks, Brian.
to record the second part. Yeah, I think so we talked about Thrawn. Do we want to talk any more about Bo-Katan? Because I know when her episode came up and she was revealed to be in the episode, I didn't know that was coming. So that was a big surprise to me. And my head about exploded. Because as soon as she leans over and you see the makeup on the helmet, I was like, I know who that is. And this is fucking fantastic. And then compound with the fact that at the end of the episode, she name drops Ahsoka. That blew my mind a second time. But yeah, that I know you and I talked, I think, I'm trying to remember now. I think I had watched and you did not. And I had said, like, you're in for a surprise. And then you kind of said, I already know what's coming because I read Twitter. And I was like, how did you do that?
I know.
But I mean, was that still fun for you watching that episode?
It was, absolutely. Because I still don't know what to expect.
Yeah.
So it was an adventure. It was fun. That was Bryce Dallas Howard's episode.
Yeah.
And it was just Star Wars-y from beginning to end. It was an adventure. I did really enjoy that, the battle scenes and the information and the way she played Bo-Katan. It was perfection.
Yeah.
That kind of no nonsense, dry acting. It was just spot on. I'd love to see more of her too. I don't know, like, if it was just that was a bridge episode to get us to Ahsoka, and it was fun, and I'm okay with that too. Not everything needs to be a spinoff for me. I totally get it.
Well, I can see Bo-Katan fitting in more with Mandalorian and sort of what they've teased so far. One, she's a Mandalorian.
Right.
Two, she has connections to the Darksaber.
Yes.
Which is
we gotta get that back.
Yeah, that's a big Star Wars lore-y thing that's in there that we still don't know.
How did she lose it?
Right,
because Moff Gideon have it.
All right, so let's try to trace this back from what we remember. So, it was on Mandalore. Oh Jesus Christ! Now I'm trying to remember. Pre-Vizsla, which was Jon Favreau's voiced character for the Clone Wars, had the Darksaber originally. Darth Maul won it from him when he ruled Mandalore. Maul had it, lost it to... Wait, did he have it when he fought Ahsoka? No, he had his lightsaber. So at some point, he loses the Darksaber. And it ends up with Sabine
Yeah,
in Rebels.
this is why I have to watch Rebels again. She ends up with it and is training with it.
Right.
And I don't know if it's at the end of that episode or if it's a two-parter, but she ends up giving it to Bo, who I don't think wanted to be the leader of Mandalore.
Right.
But after everything that they went through in that episode, she gives it to her and she takes over the mantle of
Right. So last
leading.
we've seen of it is before Mandalorian. Bo-Katan had it on Mandalore as they were free of any type of rule. Like Mandalorians were in charge of Mandalore at that time, and Bo-Katan had the Darksaber. So between then and the beginning of Mandalorian, Moff Gideon has somehow either taken over Mandalore or had some sort of insurrection there, and now he's got his hand on the Darksaber also, which apparently seems to have splintered the Mandalorians because they're all divided everywhere across the galaxy.
And, with Mando not taking off his mask and like freaking out because they took off their masks.
Right.
Or their helmets. That was, to me, a little bit confusing because I don't know enough about his journey. Because they keep showing like spots of his backstory.
Yeah.
And I don't know if it's just me not connecting the dots correctly or why his clan is different than, the clan that can take their helmets off.
Well, I guess I didn't really think twice about it until that episode with Bo-Katan, but like, I went through how many seasons of the Clone Wars and Rebels where you see other Mandalorians taking off their helmets, and then you get to Mandalorian and no one removes their helmet.
No.
And suddenly, the thought didn't even occur to me that I had seen other Mandalorians take off their helmets in other series, and that why this shouldn't be weird. Suddenly, I just accepted it, like, oh, okay, yeah, that's definitely what everybody does. Yeah, no one does that. And it wasn't until the episode where Bo-Katan shows up, takes off her helmet, and suddenly it's a big deal. And I was like, no, wait, yeah, that's normal for them. They take off their helmets all the time.
Well, even with Timothy Olympian's character, and he takes off his helmet. He's like, you're not Mandalorian, like immediately. You're not a Mando.
Right.
So that's another story in itself. What kind of journey has he been on, and what's, all of the Mandalorians that were in season 1, none of them took off their helmets because this is the way.
Well, Bo-Katan
I don't even know what it means, but I keep saying it. This is the way.
Bo-Katan seems to hint that the sect of Mandalorian that Din and the Mando is part of almost feel like a cult. She seems to refer to them as like a cult sect of Mandalorians. Like, oh, you belong to that one. You're part of that group. So, but yeah, I mean, to your point, I don't know why that group is like that, but it seems to be like they're almost shunned and frowned upon compared to the larger Mandalorian group.
Right. I need that, that meme with all of the things on the wall and people are connecting it with string. And
oh, yeah.
He's like pointing at it with a cigarette in his mouth, like, I need a giant board just for Star Wars. So I need to connect the dots.
I mean, I'm sure that'll be us eventually.
Paula's not going to work. She's in the basement. She's at her board.
I mean, I just assume that's what you do on your lunch break at the store.
Exactly, I do. And I use little Lego figures to do it.
See? You need props. It all comes together. Sort of spinning with the Darksaber, since Sabine has had her hand on it and we're getting more Rebels connections, do we want to take a guess that we'll see Sabine in The Mandalorian? She's another one that would, I think, fit right at home in this show.
Absolutely. I think with Dave Filoni being executive producer, we're going to see all of it. Like, he's going to feed us what we want. We are hungry baby birds squawking for the worm, and he's got the worm, and the worm is Ahsoka and Sabine and maybe Hera.
Your metaphors are on point tonight. I just want you to know
that. 2 days off will do that to you. I took my vitamins today. I went for a run. Get ready for the podcast.
Yeah, so you've been prepping for this for a while now. You're just foaming at the mouth, ready to get all your Star Warsy stuff out.
And it's been a while since I podcasted too.
I know.
It's been a while since I got to talk with people outside of Lego. Want to know what sets are coming out with Star Wars?
Yeah, anything you want to plug while you're here, go for it.
Well, there's a new Mandalorian set coming out January 1st.
Oh wait, I don't even know if I know what the new one is.
So it's with a bantha. So it's on.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, it's on Tatooine. But it's so funny because when the first Mando set came out in season 1, and I took his little helmet off, and he has no face. because you didn't know what he looked like. It was like 3 episodes in, you didn't know what he looked like.
Yeah.
And so now we're into season 2, and we got the Razor Crest. And again, I'm like, okay, well, they probably printed his face. So I take his helmet off. No face! No face. It's a solid black brick, like face brick, and
I
there's
love
no
that.
face. I
I
know.
love
And
it.
I was like, come on, you could have given us a face. We've seen it twice now. We've seen it twice. I feel like
Only seen it once, right?
we only see it once.
At the end of season 1 when he gets the crap kicked out of him from the
Yeah,
explosion.
okay.
I think that's the only time we've seen it.
He did take his helmet off when he was with that chick.
But we never see his face.
That's true. We never saw it. I thought we saw it twice. Okay, so we only see it once. But yeah, still could have. We all know what Pedro Pascal looks like. This is
True.
no secret. This is not a secret. But anyway, I digress. Let's go back to Ahsoka.
I mean, I don't know if I have too much left to, like, talking points wise. I think we covered sort of everything that I wanted to cover. So, I don't know. Is there anything else that we didn't talk about that you want to talk about?
I before the episode started, I went on a little rant, and I just want to make sure everybody knows that we're so excited about this live action show. Just let me have my moment, Brian. I'm sorry. I'll be quick.
No, do what you got to do. I'm giving you the platform.
Oh my gosh. I feel like, and I feel like we are so excited about this hot show and everyone's watching it, but it really makes you appreciate what we had with Rebels and Clone Wars. So just like we were kind of talking about before, if you have time, go back and watch them, or watch them for the first time, because they're absolutely incredible. And, I have a 15-year-old niece, and she's watching Mandalorian because Baby Yoda is so cute. But all of these characters are coming up, and she's like, I finally know what you've been talking about, Aunt Paula, with Ahsoka. I'm like, you don't know, because she's incredible. But you have to start at the beginning when she was obnoxious.
Snips.
And Snips, Sky Guy. You have to go all the way back to the beginning if you can. And just, you don't have to be a Star Wars fan and know everything. You don't. You don't have to watch those episodes to appreciate what they're doing with The Mandalorian, but it helps. It helps to see what, and it's an animated series, yes, a cartoon, if you will. But it's so much more than that. The writing, the storyline, yeah, there's filler episodes, but that's with every TV show. But, Rebels especially was so just such a great storyline and so much fun, and the great characters like Hera and Zeb, Sabine, who in The Mandalorian we're probably going to see. I would bet my Lego on it that we're going to see her. But take the time to go back and visit those episodes because they're incredible.
Yeah, I think for anyone that wants to expand their Star Wars lore, that's a good way to do it. If you get into those shows, I think you'll understand why Paula and I and anyone that's watched those shows has such a love for Dave Filoni and what he's done for Star Wars. Like he when they did Clone Wars, George Lucas had a very big hand in Clone Wars. Dave Filoni was basically like his protege. Like George Lucas was teaching Dave everything about Star Wars, and that's where Dave gets his knowledge from. Dave Filoni is the closest thing we have to George Lucas that is involved in Star Wars right now. So if you want to see George's influence in Star Wars, for the love of God, watch these shows because they are amazing.
It's like they took the midichlorians out of George Lucas and injected them.
And see, I don't know if you're going to win people over name-dropping midichlorians like that.
Into Dave Filoni. Like he was a clone pickled in a jar.
And it all comes back around.
And they grew him.
So I guess that's pretty much...
Solo saved them all.
Of course, that's how all stories end, right? Happily ever after.
Happily ever after.
For the most part, that's all I got. I didn't know. We'll just end it with, do you have any other predictions or speculation you want to go over for the remainder of the season?
I'm very intrigued. Like, usually I have some type of spoiler or someone's revealed something on Twitter about what's going to be happening. I have no idea.
Well, that's good, because I wanted you to keep that to yourself anyway.
That's a first for me. That, I would never, I would never spoil things just because I like spoilers. But I'm really intrigued about tomorrow's episode. So, yeah, I might have to watch it in the morning before work.
Well, you said you start at what, 1 o'clock? So you got plenty of time in the
Yes,
morning to watch it.
plenty of time to drink my hot cocoa, or even watch it on the potty.
Yeah, we can
Start
do
it
that
on the
now.
potty.
Just take your phone in the
Yeah.
bathroom. It's all good.
I wash my hands. Everything's fine.
I know. I was talking to somebody at work today that this is the first Friday in like 2 or 3 weeks that I actually have to go to work. I haven't had off this Friday. So like I got used to my little routine of waking up first thing in the morning to watch Mandalorian, and now I got to wait all afternoon before I can get home and watch it. So it's going to be a long day tomorrow waiting to watch that show.
I've been working early on Fridays, so I'm closing on a Friday, and that's why I gotta hopefully watch it in the morning. But if not, I'm sure Twitter will tell me exactly what's going on.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. By the time you start work, it will be out there.
Thanks, Twitter.
Which is going to be the other hard thing is I'm going to have to avoid social media all day tomorrow because I know it's going to be out there, which is hard enough as it is.
It's a side quest. It's going to be a side quest.
Really, yeah. Just find something to do at work to distract yourself from social media and not working. Maybe actually try to do work while I'm there. We'll see.
It was so hard this week not to like correct people about Baby Yoda's name. Like, don't you know? Because we have Baby Yoda product in the store. It's Baby Yoda. I'm like, is it?
Does it say the child on the stuff, or does it?
It says the child. So
okay.
Disney does not want him referred to as Baby Yoda.
Yeah.
So all the product that comes out is the child. Yeah, which is fine. I'm okay with it, Disney.
Yeah.
You know.
I wonder now that we have a name if they're actually going to change all the box art to Grogu.
Grogu. It'll be interesting when the product comes out in January, what it actually says on the box, because the product is already created. And I feel like if it would have said Grogu, there probably would have been leaks already.
Oh, true.
People just can't keep their mouths shut.
Yeah.
And the leaks usually happen in Europe, like we hear a lot from. Yeah. So
fair.
I have a funny feeling it would have come out. Someone would have snapped a picture and been creepy about it.
Well, I think that's where we're going to end this one. Yeah, so we've effectively talked for an hour, which is about sort of what I expected. We didn't really have too much to go on. It's just one episode, basically, of the show, and we talked for an hour. So that's, Star Wars. Yay. That's what we do.
Yay. Choke on it.
Yeah, I really want that posted somewhere. Just a quote from Paula Miller. Choke on it. Choke on your Star Wars.
Star Wars. Choke on it.
Very forceful about it, too. Just really hammered home.
The Force Awakens.
All right. Well, I think that's it for us. Paula, again, thank you for coming on.
Yeah, absolutely.
We'll try to reconvene for the end of season 2. Hopefully we can get together with everybody and have a joint group conversation about all the cool shit that we've seen in the last 3 episodes.
I would love that.
But at this point, we're going to take a break, and I'll be handing it over to Josh. Whenever we come back, Josh and I will sit down and talk about our conversation for the same type of topic. So you probably hear some repeat questions, but hopefully some different answers. We'll see.
Don't let me down, Josh.
All the pressure's on you. All right, and we're back for the second half of this episode, which includes a new guest. So joining me now for continued discussion on The Mandalorian is mediocre Star Wars fan Josh Zorch.
That is probably the most accurate and the moniker that I should take the least offense to so far recently. So yeah, that's quite apt.
I figured that was a safe description. All right, so before we get too far into this, I'm going to give another heads up. Spoiler alert still applies from earlier in the episode. We're still knee-deep into spoilers, where everything is fair game as far as Mandalorian, Star Wars in general, and stuff like that. So if you've skipped ahead for whatever reason to this part of the conversation, spoilers are still still fair game. We will still cover whatever the hell we want to. So Josh, you had a chance to catch up on Paul and I's conversation, correct?
I did. It was a very enjoyable chat to listen to.
Okay. Good deal. All right, so we're going to jump right back into it. So mainly, we tried to do this episode to get thoughts on Ahsoka's appearance in The Mandalorian.
Okay.
I know you, and I even mentioned in the intro, have a very general Star Wars knowledge. You've seen the movies and The Mandalorian, correct?
Yes.
Anything other than that?
No. In fact, like listening, and this is not obviously the first time that these other properties and lore shows were brought up in the history of Bry Guy, but yeah, like anytime that Rebels or Clone Wars, extended universe novels, any of that has been part of the discussion, if it's an episode that I've been on, if listeners, if you go back and listen to any of those, you will notice a very prolonged silence from me for a long time. And if it's not one that I was a guest on and I was just a fan and listener of, I tried to listen with rapt attention as much as possible. I mean, people who are into any kind of world building IP, whether it's Star Wars, Harry Potter, Marvel, comics, anything, Game of Thrones, it doesn't even have to be genre, just general world building, is, I think, drawn to the details.
Yeah.
And the more it broadens, the more that there is to uncover is more interesting. So even if it's all jumbled in my head and I don't, put the pieces together in the way that they are yet, it's always interesting to listen to.
Okay. Well, that's a good start. So we're sort of just going to jump into I think the question that Paula sort of presented to you on the first part.
Mm-hmm.
More or less, has the stuff you've seen so far in The Mandalorian, all these sort of breadcrumbs and stuff like that, does that interest you into diving into any of the other world-building shows like Clone Wars or Rebels or anything else that's out there?
Well, I did hear her challenge is not the right word, but the query she poses.
I think there's a bit of a challenge in there.
A little bit, yeah. It almost seemed like I'm going to ask you this, but I'm more or less, there's an expectation laid down.
It's one of those things you tell the kids, like reverse psychology of like, you won't do it. You won't watch this.
Yes. There was almost like, okay, I'm going to check in with you in a couple weeks. And there's this unspoken indirect obligation I'm setting in front of you.
Yes.
Well, I obviously I do have an answer to that. But let's kind of go through our discussion. And I think my response will then make more sense.
Okay. Yeah, we'll cover what we have, and we'll end with that. We'll loop back around to that.
Okay. One thing before we do dive in, I want to say that during your chat, you made a comment to Paula regarding me. Said, "Oh, hey, all right, Josh. Well, you got one fan," and Paula responded, "Oh, I always care about what Josh thinks." Now, I will say the use of the word "fan" by you implies that person has like a positive view of what the person's thoughts are and whatnot. I don't necessarily think I could make that presumption. Caring about what someone is saying or doing or thinking doesn't always necessarily mean they're a fan. And I try to take that humbly.
And I tried to give you a compliment on there, and now you're spinning it back the other way.
I'm not good at taking compliments. I don't know what to say. I'm too self-aggrandizing. I don't know.
That's fair. All right, so given, again, sort of like your general Star Wars knowledge and compounded that with whatever details Paula or myself have or will give you for some of these characters, again, the whole reason for this was to talk about Ahsoka and her final live action appearance in a Star Wars show.
Mm-hmm.
So we'll just kick off with that. What did you think? Having, again, sort of a passing knowledge of the character in Star Wars, what did you think of live action Ahsoka?
So my exposure to her is simply from a visual sense. I have seen pictures, I have seen short video clips of the animated version and whatnot. I don't really know anything about the personality, the mannerisms, the speech patterns. I don't know anything about the character other than basically just the superficial image.
Yeah.
The only critique I had, and I think I would have this regardless of whether I had a reference or not, the only critique I would have from the very basic visual sense is that the part of her head that I'm just going to call her hair.
Like the tails.
Sure.
Yeah.
I think I expected that, I think I expected that to feel like it moved a little bit more.
Yeah.
Whereas the construction of it seemed, to be fair, they may have thought, look, if this thing is just solid on her head, we don't have to worry about its behavior and how it moves. We don't have to account for that. But I think visually it would have been more interesting in a live action sense if it wasn't like it looked like it was one of the few things that looked like a costume to me that I've seen, especially on this show. And that's a very nitpicky thing, I admit, but it just stood out to me a little bit. Other than that, I think like from the moment she was on screen, and I kind of knew that, like when they said the name in the previous episode or two, I'm like, oh, that's that character. I know what she looks like, but
Right,
people
right.
talk about her all the time. So the moment that the episode opens with her, especially, and I think like you guys, I at least knew enough that she was coming eventually this season. And just from the start, it's like opening scene, opening moment. Oh shit, Ahsoka's on screen. She looked badass.
Yeah, I was very surprised they showed her that soon. I really thought it was going to be... I would have put money on her being the tease, like the season finale tease. Like, we're just going to slowly get to Ahsoka, and then by the time we get to the finale, there she is.
Sure, and I could have seen that playing out if they didn't do it that way. At the very least, like writing down that I um I was happy that if they were going to do this, it was literally right from the jump.
Yeah.
If they and if they had waited till the season finale for such a from what I can tell from you guys, it's like such a big thing to be happening. If it would have been, well, she's in like the last half of the episode, or she's in the last 10 minutes, and maybe she'll show up in episode 2 or 3 of season 3. This was 40 minutes of her,
Right.
with
Yeah.
a little bit of other people thrown in, and if they're gonna do it, I'm glad they did it.
Well, that's it's a fine line too, and I don't remember how much we covered when Paul and I talked, but for a show that's called The Mandalorian,
Mm-hmm.
and I don't know if it just comes with more of the anticipation for seeing Ahsoka, but they gave her a lot of screen time in this episode, which starts to make me a little bit fearful for the show as a whole,
Mm-hmm.
because like you still want to follow Mando and Grogu now,
Yeah.
and see what their adventure gets up to, where they go, characters that they meet along the way, scenarios they get into. As much as, again, I love the Star Wars lore and the world building and the breadcrumbs that lead to the larger galactic conflict, but I don't want too much of that to distract from what I thought this show was from season 1, which was the outskirts of the galaxy and smaller conflicts, and like you're peripherally seeing the effect of the galactic civil war on the galaxy, but you're not in it. Like it's starting to feel like
you're never
we're
crossing
getting...
paths with it, but
Right.
You see the effects it has.
And now it's starting to feel like we're getting in it, and I don't know how much I like that.
So do you feel, and I agree with you that there's been a distinct shift from season 1 to season 2 in that regard, just in the focus of the story.
Yeah.
I don't, so far in season 2, I can't really get a sense of what I think the focus of everything is. I don't really, so like, I've been wanting to say this for a while, and I know it's not an original thought. I've seen it everywhere, but to me, this, especially into the second season, it feels like this should be called Side Quest, the show.
Oh, yes. Yeah, I agree.
Like, I kind of understand overall, the Mandalorian character we are following is trying to get Grogu, Baby Yoda, somewhere.
Yes.
Everything happens along the way in his journey to do that. But I've perceived less of the overall arc of that piece of it in season 2. Every episode so far has been, yes, I'm trying to go to the next stop, and in order to do that, this person needs a thing. I got to do a thing to get information, to get armor, to do a thing, to get a thing, just to be able to go to the next stop.
Right.
And it's just the next stop, the next stop, the next stop. I don't really see the end game yet, per se, what the overall purpose will be building to.
And it's almost like how they have to do it for episodic like what they're seemingly trying to do for like episodic television. Like that's the best way to keep episodes, for the most part, self-contained.
Yeah.
Like you have the overarching, we're just trying to get somewhere. We still don't know where that somewhere is, but this is the little mini adventure that happens on the way there.
Which I will agree. Now, given a comment you made in your discussion with Paula, which was, it seems like you are enjoying this, and I guess I will call it a slight throwback, even though it's only been a few years, to a episodic weekly view of something. You don't binge. You just, see it like normal television. Even though maybe I wasn't alive for it as much, but my perception of shows that were on heavy syndication, they were on Nick at Night, they were on other networks when I was growing up that were showing, TV from the 70s or 80s. The impression I have of a lot of that was not to, like, the goal was really not to tell narrative. The goal was to tell episodic weekly stories.
Right.
And maybe the audience didn't care about the broader picture, or maybe they didn't care because that's not what they were given to care about, so they learned not to care about it. I don't know.
Yeah.
So like, was it chicken or the egg? I don't know. This so far, like season 2 feels that way to me, that either they're making it as if like at the end of whatever, like episode 8 of this season, whether anything significant has happened or not, it seems like they're not that preoccupied with it. Like I don't yet see the road ahead.
Right. And you have to wonder if
for
that's
this.
because they don't know where they're going or how much longer they want this series to last. It's one of the, I feel like it starts to get to the point where, like, and I always come back to it because it's one of my favorite shows, but Lost. Like,
Mhm.
Lost was a big hit. It had a lot of hype around it where viewers were tuning in every week to see the mysteries and what's going on. And it got to the point where ABC wanted to just continue making the show because it's a moneymaker for them. But the writers are like, we know where we need to get to. In between there, we have no idea basically what the hell's going on or how long to prolong this.
Mm-hmm.
So that's why the middle of that series falls apart, because they don't know what the fuck they're doing or where the end game is.
Right.
And then finally, somewhere in season 3, they said, okay, you're getting 6 seasons, and that's where you're going. And suddenly, the light, they see the light at the end of the tunnel, and the writing and story and narrative get that much tighter because they know how to get where they want to go and how to get there. And maybe there are discussions that they're having behind the scenes for Mandalorian. Like, I'm hoping that they know, like, okay, we want to go, you know, if we have our choice, 4 seasons or 5 seasons, because I don't think they can prolong Mando runs with Baby Yoda for 10 years. I don't think that show's going to last that long if that's all it is. If it's side quest the movie.
Especially if it's 8 episodes that you're waiting a year to get to
Right.
the next piece. Yes, correct.
So
I would agree.
we need either some sort of storytelling, like a narrative decision to happen, that's some sort of twist to sort of flip the show on its head to suddenly give you something else to wonder about or ask questions about or anticipate. If it's just the same idea that doesn't really change, because I feel like the difference between this season and the first season still had the same idea. Mando decides to save Baby Yoda and keep him from the Imperials, which is the same plot that's happening in season 2. The difference is that in season 1, and I'm trying to remember in season 1, I don't remember too many like bigger name Star Wars lore cameos that showed up.
Okay.
Season 2, we're 5 episodes in, and we have Ahsoka, we have Bo-Katan, we have Boba Fett. Like, these are big name fucking people in Star Wars, and we're 5 episodes in, and 3 of those 5 episodes have larger Star Wars universe connections.
Sure.
So, I don't know if that's like, and again, it's a catch-22 for me, because I love that stuff. As a fan that absorbs all this stuff and knows the background on some of these characters, when they pop up, my head explodes every single week. That I'm like, who are we going to see? What is going to go on? What's going to, blow my mind this week? But I do think it's...
It sounds like this. You didn't think it was going to be done through this vehicle.
No. I would have hoped... and again, some of these I feel like are to your point of sort of like a connected universe. I think you were talking about like Marvel and Game of Thrones and stuff like that. I feel like Disney is unsure what to do with Star Wars. The movies are very divisive with people, especially the sequel trilogy right now.
Mm-hmm.
The one thing that Star Wars fans seem to all get behind right now is The Mandalorian. So this becomes now their testing ground, I think. Which I think this Ahsoka episode very much leans to like a backdoor pilot for this character. Like, okay, we're going to throw in an episode. We're going to give her some time to shine. If the fans and, the internet or whoever they're gauging this response on, if they take to it well enough, okay, well, let's see more of her somewhere else down the line and something. Maybe not necessarily this show.
Right.
But if it tracks well enough, we could give her own series. There's been rumors of Boba Fett spinoff type of thing possibly happening. I haven't seen anything official for that yet, and I guess it depends if he comes back up sometime in season 2 and what they do with that character, but that's definitely a cameo that has to lead somewhere.
So, and to that point specifically, I feel like I remember hearing rumblings of a Boba Fett show ever since the idea of Disney Plus was officially announced, and they said we're going to make original content, and it's going to be for these IPs. If, in my opinion, again coming from my position in this particular fandom arena, it would seem redundant to me or strange to have your really, it seems like initially only famous Mandalorian character from the first 9 movies who isn't the central character and star of this show that they have called The Mandalorian and that they are following, and then make a separate spinoff just for that character who's not, I don't want to say effectively the same thing, but from what I was picking up from people, the sort of urban legend and the cult fan status that Boba Fett garnered over so many years was because of the look of the armor, because there's very few, and especially before the prequel trilogy, that it was sort of like that cool masked mystery character, and it'd be really fun to know more about what he's about, what his background is, where does he come from, why does he do those things, what is he wearing, does that mean something, etc. I think, in my opinion, it feels like they're telling that story. They're answering almost every question about they're answering the questions that came out of the lore of Boba Fett with some of the background of the Mandalorian without it having to be Boba Fett. So is Boba Fett himself, is that specific character still of interest? Like, what more can be garnered and learned from that would still be interesting that you're not already getting answers to? Like, especially if you don't necessarily want to know, if you don't want to be shoved back into the main Skywalker, Darth Vader saga years, like the main storylines. It feels like doing something with Boba Fett, like inevitably, that's exactly where you'd be trapped.
Yeah, I think I remember when Disney bought Lucasfilm and there was talk of all these spin-off movies that they were going to do. That's where like the Obi-Wan Kenobi spin-off movie was sort of on the table. That's where Rogue One was on the table. We had Rogue One on the table. We had, I think at some point, maybe like a Yoda film was supposedly on the table. And I do remember hearing rumblings of the Boba Fett movie when, when Disney wanted to put all this stuff in theaters. And I feel like, if I remember right, Boba Fett was the one that Josh Trank was supposed to do, and then he got canned from that job.
Oh, okay.
If the rumors are true.
Is that part of the Fantastic Four fallout?
I think it was part of that, yeah. Some of that stuff.
Okay.
But, I don't know what Boba Fett's movie entailed. I don't know if it was going to be just like a bounty hunter movie featuring Boba Fett, if it was going to be like a Boba Fett backstory movie, and if it's more sort of a backstory or a continuation of his character, because the last we see of him, he falls in the Sarlacc pit in Return of the Jedi.
Right.
And, it's up to the Star Wars fans to decide. If you ask any Star Wars fan, he definitely made it out. So now we get confirmation he survived the pit.
Yeah.
So I don't know if that movie would have been post Return of the Jedi to see his journey out of the pit and what happens to him after that, or if it would be more of a prequel, like the heyday of bounty hunting for Boba Fett pre-Empire Strikes Back or something like that. I don't know but sort of what I'm getting at is there could have been story ideas in the movie that they have then folded into The Mandalorian to use for him, or at the very least they're saving them for this rumored mini-series that he might be a part of.
Perhaps. I think the general question being how much and to what degree can we expect this series to be its own self-contained thing? And is that the impression we think we were given from the get-go, or was it one we invented for ourselves?
Yeah.
It is part of the equation to work out. I'm not just because of my knowledge base right now, but honestly, so what people say all the time, for instance, that the world of comic books can be extremely overwhelming and intimidating for anybody new, especially in the 2000s, to get into, because you have decades of backsource material for some of this stuff.
Yeah.
So sometimes when they do, complete reboots, DC does it every couple of years, apparently, the last 15, 20 years, is sometimes if they do an entire like company reboot or a character line reboot, that people describe it as like that's a way for us to get people in at the ground level again who there's no way that they're going to understand how to obtain and make sense of consuming 30 years of back material.
Right.
Honestly, for myself, I don't know if I can necessarily speak for Sarah in this regard, but I wouldn't be surprised if she would say something kind of similar. That for me, The Mandalorian was that thing for me for Star Wars. And maybe one of the reasons that in the past one of the several reasons in the past that, I haven't gone out to watch the animated shows and whatnot. This seemed cool. It's getting made. It starts in 2019. I'm like, the production value on this, the effects on this are going to be amazing. Disney is spending all the world's money on everything they're doing. It's not going to be chintzy. And it's something that I don't necessarily have to know everything to come into.
Right.
And even if there is a bunch of stuff in there that would either enhance my experience or just make more sense to me or whatever, if I did know it, that's fine. But I can enjoy and follow everything that I'm seeing now. And the more that, at least just looking at this show, that they do seem like that they kind of splinter all those outside things on, I'm like, okay, I can appreciate that. That thing looks cool. But if it's framed in such a way that I know it's obvious that there are so many other implications and meanings to these things that I'm not picking up and I'm not aware of. Yeah, that actually, I understand it kind of maybe fuels Paula's argument in, well, okay, well then go learn all the stuff that you don't know.
Right.
I get that side of it, but if what I'm going into this believing is that I don't need to do all that stuff to be able to completely get everything that I'm supposed to out of this, then it becomes a little disconcerting.
Well, I guess that's the part that one question I had for you that I was going to try to bring up.
Okay.
Probably good a time as now as any, but the cameos and like the lore background that Star Wars fans are getting, Paul and I are picking up on, but might go over your head, or you're seeing them focus on something that you're not sure what that is or why that's important, so you're just kind of brushing it off. Is any of that stuff distracting to you, or does it sort of, to Paula's point, feed the fuel that it's like, well, I don't know what that is, but I'm curious enough to want to find out what that is?
So I feel I had very few moments of that in the first season.
Yeah. Which I think is by design.
That at the very least, if I was never going to consider consuming any more than I already have, I wasn't given the impression from the plots and the writing and the characters that I was missing a ton by not doing so.
Yeah.
These first 5 episodes, especially the last 3, are starting to feel that way more.
I mean, is it distracting to you, or curiosity getting the better of you?
I wouldn't say distracting yet.
Okay.
In the way that it's how do I say? I think, tying it to something we were talking about a few minutes ago, I think it is becoming distracting to and as you sort of mentioned, it is distracting from what the rest of the plot is supposed to be.
Right. The whole hook of season 1.
What the purpose of the show is supposed to be.
Yeah.
If we're only now learning what the show is supposed to be, or if they kind of pivoted from season 1 to season 2 to what they're now designing a slightly different purpose to be.
Right.
I can't quite tell that. But is it distracting me from that particular scene or that particular episode to the point that I'm like, oh, now I just can't keep track of things? No,
yeah.
Not so much.
Okay.
They're at least doing I feel like they're doing a good enough job of, in the moment, telling you anything you need to know to just understand what you're watching in the moment.
Okay. Yeah,
But
and really that's all the show needs to do.
Yeah, and now, to be fair, like, Katie Sackhoff's character in, was it Bo-Katan?
Yes. Yeah.
I had no idea she was a thing.
Yeah.
Before that. So, like, Ahsoka is much more iconic and visually representative in pop culture and the zeitgeist.
Mm-hmm.
so that I would have recognized Bo-Katan. I did not know until after the show. So I had no reaction to her before that, but I
Right,
also wasn't
okay.
lost. Like, they
Yeah.
gave me, if they're going to do that, as long as they give you enough that it might be apparent that there's more to this that come from something else, but my lack of knowledge, my absence of knowledge of that at the moment is not going to allow me to understand what is happening and what they are saying, what they are referencing and talking about, then that's a failure on their part, in my opinion.
Right. Yeah.
And I haven't experienced that yet.
And I guess Paul and I's hope is that, like, when the character like Bo-Katan shows up, who, going into the episode you know nothing about, you learn a little bit about her in that episode. But over the course of that episode, she interests you so much that it's going to be like, wait, I want to know what's up with her, because there's more of her story other places. It's sort of just going with on the cameo route. Do you think we'll see any other, as far as you know, like, characters that are sort of in your wheelhouse that you can pick out that might pop up? Do you expect to see, or would you want to venture any guesses for any, like, either famous Jedi or other famous Star Wars characters that either you think might show up or maybe you'd like to see show up? Because at this point, I feel like most cameos are on the table.
So before I answer that, so I knew I would need to double check a clarification with you guys on this. So this show is taking place between episodes 6 and 7.
Yes.
And it's on the more recent side of episode 6.
Yes. It's
Where
probably
there's
5-ish
like
years after Return of the Jedi. So 25-ish years before Force Awakens.
Okay, perfect. I mean, yeah, I guess in that timeline, given anybody who hasn't died yet and who's either still around that I know that either shows up in,
because you think it's
episode
at this
7
point, let's
or
see, that, like,
anything,
the galaxy at large,
that I'm aware of too.
the galaxy at large, the Rebel Alliance has defeated the Empire. They
Mhm.
are in the process of restructuring the government. They're making the New Republic. But the Empire is so spread out and rooted in the entire galaxy that sects of the Empire that are around have sort of broken into splinter groups.
Mm-hmm.
And each group is still trying to... The Emperor was the unifying force for the Empire. Without the Empire, or without the Emperor, the Empire, it just kind of... There's, like, power grabs. So there's people that are higher in the hierarchy of the Empire that say, okay, well, I'm in charge of this sect of the military, so they're my group, and we're going to do our thing. And then there's other person that's in charge of this group, and we're going to do it. There's no unifying force for the Empire.
Okay.
And with the New Republic being spread thin, Leia presumably is trying to structure that government together and deal with the problems of insurrection from the Empire that just doesn't want to go away, on top of trying to unify the galaxy under the New Republic. I really don't know what Han would be doing at this time. I don't know if he'd be part of the government or, involved in the military, because it's still hit or miss whether or not he was actually ever into that thing. I would think he'd be by Leia's side, but if she's doing government work and he doesn't give a shit about government work, I don't really know what the hell he's doing.
So it's a good point. So I think potentially the again, if we're also trying to maybe have things occur that aren't integral to the rest of the plot, they're just things that happen. So given that timeline, so if we're 25 years away from the opening moments of Force Awakens, at some point along this path, whether it has already started or not, is it the First Order?
Yeah.
Okay. So the First Order will start to build at some point.
Yes.
Looking at all the characters that are arguably 30 to 40 years old in Force Awakens, if you had a compelling reason to cross paths with them, maybe not even in a way that necessarily said, oh, I can already see how you end up because you're 6 right now.
Yeah.
But it could be cool, for instance. Like, I would have more interest in coming across very, very young versions of characters who are in their 30s to 40s in Force Awakens, as opposed to people who are already adults and have done a lot by the time episode 6 is done. Like, I don't want to run into Han Solo. I don't want to run into Leia. But what could be cool is, what if he came across a 7-year-old Admiral Hux?
Yeah.
What if he came across just a kid in a village whose name is Poe Dameron?
Right.
Who's not necessarily a rebel yet, who's not a fighter. You don't have to see the slick talking person who's, you know, maybe running errands for some guy in the village, and you just encounter it.
Yeah.
It's a thing he comes across, but it's inconsequential to both him and the later story.
And I'm also
Those
wondering,
are the kinds of... Go ahead.
well, just that, like, again, Disney isn't, I feel like they get really gun shy with stuff like that. So where I feel like they should just stick to their creative guns, fuck what everybody thinks on the internet, and just do what you want to do.
Sure.
I think Rise of Skywalker has proven they don't want to do that.
Okay.
It's such a reaction to internet hate and all the pissed off fanboy man baby people that are on the internet that want to bitch about Star Wars because they're tarnishing their childhood or whatever the fuck their problem is with it.
Right.
Those people are influencing Star Wars more than I'd like them to. And to that point, as divisive as that sequel trilogy is, I would be really surprised if Disney would lay breadcrumbs like that for a trilogy that is that divisive. Like, they're
Like,
hitting
even,
the pocket of original trilogy
kind
stuff.
of ignoring it at all.
Right. Because
altogether.
that's what everybody wants. They want that's the Venn diagram for Star Wars. The original trilogy is the one thing everyone can agree on, that's what Star Wars is.
Okay.
You have people that like the prequels, you have people that like the sequel trilogy, you have people that like, you know, the original trilogy and all the stuff in between. But the majority of people, the OG original trilogy Star Wars is Star Wars, and that's the best way to hit the most people. It's the lowest common denominator for Star Wars. Instead of Disney just saying, we're going to take a creative direction. If you like it, you like it. We're going to try to attract fans for this specific genre or whatever we want to do. It doesn't seem like they're doing that.
So correct me if I'm wrong. So you guys also mentioned it in your discussion earlier that Clone Wars takes place... Well, both Clone Wars and Rebels take place between episodes 3 and 4, correct?
Clone Wars is between 2 and 3.
Okay, and I forget those storylines.
So episode 2 ends.
It's not until episode 3 that he uses the clones to turn on the rest of people. Between 2 and 3, the clones are seen as our good forces.
Right. So, like, episode 2 ends, Yoda is quoted as saying, like, begun the Clone Wars have.
Yeah.
And the cartoon picks up right in the middle of the Clone Wars.
So in many ways, the clones are maybe not the heroes, but they are not the antagonists.
No, it's still, you're
Clone
still,
Wars.
for the most part, like, Count Dooku is the villain of the Clone Wars. Him and the Emperor, the shady Emperor.
Okay.
They're the ones that are the evil army trying to bring about destruction and disorder in the galaxy. And it's the Republic, which is the clone troopers and the Jedi, trying to combat that and keep the galaxy together. That's the gist of the Clone Wars.
Right. So in that case, the clones are still on the side of everyone else who we believe are the good guys.
Yes.
Okay.
Now,
and then
this most
Rebels,
recent season of Clone Wars that they made exclusively for Disney Plus. The latter part of it, the last 4 episodes, run concurrently with Revenge of the Sith, which is episode 3.
Yeah. And then,
so, because by the time we get to Revenge of the Sith, Anakin turns, the Clone Wars end, and sort of the Clone Wars end, and then all shit breaks loose and hits the fan because he becomes Darth Vader in the larger Star Wars universe, and everything spirals out of control from there. But you can't have a show called The Clone Wars, experience the Clone Wars, and take place after Revenge of the Sith, because that's your endpoint, is Revenge of the Sith.
Okay, that makes sense. And then, but Rebels is kind of the lead up after Sith. That's the lead up to episode 4.
I think there's probably about a 20-ish year gap between 3 and 4. And Rebels is about, I want to say 4. It's 4 seasons, so we'll say ballpark 4 years before A New Hope.
Okay, and where it ends kind of abuts right to the beginning of New Hope?
Like Galaxy, it kind of, there's an epilogue in Rebels that coincides with Return of the Jedi. But the majority of Rebels is the Rebel Alliance is starting to figure out ways to hit and run the Empire. It's a lot of guerrilla tactics type of stuff.
Mhm.
And over the course of that series, this different rebel sects that have been scattered across the galaxy suddenly start to join together to form a larger rebellion, and then we get the rebellion in A New Hope.
Okay. So given everything, so to me, it sounds like, yes, maybe your bread and butter sweet spot center point is the original trilogy, the middle trilogy, but you've already got a fair amount of backstory and things that are filling in timelines between the prequel trilogy and that one.
Yes.
So if your current Mandalorian series that you're working on happens after the conclusion of episode 6, even if you have a character like Ahsoka or Bo-Katan that appeared in timelines prior to those events or concurrent with those other events, I get the point you're making about like, well, that's the period that everybody loves. That's what they want to see. That's what they want to draw from. It feels like there's already been, it sounds like there's been a fair amount of material that's already tried to do that. Now,
I think
why you have the show set between episodes 6 and 7, you have a 30-year timeline to deal with. Why not exploit that?
right.
Why not use that now as filling in the pieces that weren't there before? Like, maybe not even filling in the pieces. Like I said, just so part of this question started by you asking like about cameos I'd like to see or this or that. I'm just saying what might be interesting.
Right.
It would be potentially interesting to me to have inconsequential appearances of some sequel trilogy characters that appear in inconsequential fashions.
Yeah.
But because if there's been decades of the past already, your show is taking place in that time period. Why not use it?
Yeah, I agree, because I think, and this is getting to like a larger just Star Wars general discussion, but that 30-year gap between Return of the Jedi and Force Awakens has always been a time period to me that has a lot of questions. That's the time period in Star Wars that I want to know all the details that I can get for.
Mm-hmm.
And I figured they wouldn't do anything with it until we knew how the sequel trilogy concluded. Well, we've got that now. So
Sure.
I'm still waiting for them to put something in there.
Mm-hmm.
And they really haven't. Even, like you said, The Mandalorian is something that, yes, fits that 30-year gap, but it's much closer to the original trilogy stuff, so it can keep that aesthetic and that vibe and that feel, because, again,
Sure.
that's where the fan base is. But at some point, I think Disney has to stick to their creative guns and just say, we have a story we want to tell that's 5 years before Force Awakens, and just fucking do it.
Yeah, and if there's one to be told, like I think the root of Rogue One, you already had some kind of, you knew where you were going to end up, and they decided that here, this is the story of this, and here's the conclusion of those efforts.
Yeah.
Maybe they don't have something like that can easily be plucked out as connective tissue between, maybe leading up to immediately into like episode 7, but they've already got this property they're running. They're in their second season. This is the time area you're in, and yes, you might be closer to the end in your timeline, you might be closer to the end of episode 6 than you are to the beginning of 7. But again, that's why I'm saying like it would be more interesting to me for him to just happen to cross paths with people who we will see later, rather than everybody we already know and have all of this backstory for, and experiencing them in a way that doesn't necessarily define or alter either of their paths is a way that you could keep it fresh without necessarily you could pay fan service in ways that doesn't have to rewrite lore. It doesn't have to redefine anything. It just happens, and it's fun, and they move on, and you're still within the bigger narrative of the story.
Do you think the show would do a time jump? Like at Avengers 5 or 10 years later, somewhere down the line?
Potentially. I don't know if they would go. I mean, we'll see how this season wraps up, but maybe not that far, but I could see maybe several months.
Because I feel like if it's something that just sort of occurred to me thinking that 30-year gap that they have to cover, like, really, you could still use a Baby Yoda prop, because if he's 50 and looks like a baby, 10 years ain't gonna do shit. Like, you could effectively use the same thing. And if you just want to have him speak a little bit more or have a better Force abilities, you time jump a couple years and he's learned all that stuff off screen type of thing.
It could potentially. So one thing that you and Paula had brought up, the part that you said to her about what if he ends up at Luke's Jedi school and Ben ends up killing him. That was amazing real life clickbait. That was wonderful. Sorry, Paula. But the reaction was too good to pass up.
She skirted around that issue pretty good. Like, it was, I really thought she'd struggle with that, but it was like, no, Ben Solo. It's got to be, I'm siding with Ben Solo. It doesn't matter what he does.
But to the point that you guys also made about, a sort of teenage Baby Yoda at some point. But so here's my theory on that. If we presume that the maturity timeline for a species that lives 900 years is proportionate to one that only lives for 75. It doesn't mean that thing, if obviously we're seeing 50-year-old Baby Yoda is still like an infant.
Yeah.
Still like a toddler. It's not that he's become an adult 30 years earlier and is just an adult for longer.
Right.
If they have the same proportional time frames for their life, then even 20 years, that thing is 70 years old. He's maybe 4 years old.
Right. We got to get to like 200, 300 range.
Yeah, because you're telling me like Yoda dies when he's like 900, 950 something, right?
Right.
In that range. Yeah. So if you're working on that kind of scale,
right,
even 20 years is not going to do shit.
Yeah.
For that, if they stick to something like that, I do think the ideas in general are interesting, and that would be fun to explore to see, because effectively, if he has the same lifespan, then he's only like 70 or 75 by the time that Rise of Skywalker ends.
Yes.
And so what happens to the rest of his life, etc. Like, if that's how far they're going to go, I don't know. That could be fun to explore, but
yeah, it's going to be interesting how they retcon that, because like if Grogu is somewhat important to Star Wars mythos and the lore of Star Wars, they have to explain why he's not there or around in the sequel trilogy when they presumably would need him.
Right.
So right. I'm anxious to get those answers.
Yeah, and to be fair, some of this stuff that they're bringing up, like it would be really cool to know that everything we're watching is perhaps influenced by. See, I would almost rather learn that the events we know affect them, not that their involvement has anything to do with what we already know.
You're talking about the sequel trilogy stuff. Like the stuff we're seeing now are the breadcrumbs for what comes later.
To some degree. So like you said, like from the beginning, the fallout of Return of the Jedi is seen in all these places and all these cultures and civilizations that Mando is visiting and encountering.
Right.
The fall of government, the rebuilding, who does what in what areas, etc. I like that idea much more than what these characters do affect the quote main storyline at all.
Right. Yeah.
Like at the very least, I want these people on the outside.
Yeah, I thought the whole idea was for the Mandalorian to show is like they are passing through these events. They're not influencing these events.
Right. And they're not players in them whatsoever.
Right. Because again, if Mando becomes such a big deal that he has to babysit Baby Yoda, and if Baby Yoda gets to be very force sensitive and hone his skills,
mm-hmm.
then it has to be explained why they're not part of the galactic conflict 20 years from now.
Right. And maybe they'll get there.
I do want to spin back around just for like sort of the cameo thing we were talking about, because I've seen fan art, and this might lead into the fan casting discussion, because it's a point that I want to bring up with you too. Rosario got the role, and Paul and I talked about it, from fan casting. Someone drew up a mock-up of like, hey, wouldn't it be cool if Rosario Dawson was live-action Ahsoka? It got the attention of Rosario Dawson. It got the attention of Dave Filoni. One thing leads to another, and a couple years later, she gets cast in the role. I'm seeing a lot of fan casting now of Sebastian Stan as a young Luke Skywalker, which those posters are making their ways around the internet.
I've been seeing a lot of that, yeah.
So, and again, I feel like any character is on the table now. So hypothetically, if Luke Skywalker makes an appearance in The Mandalorian to somehow try to recruit or find Grogu, would you prefer another actor playing a younger Luke Skywalker, or do you think it's better, or would you prefer Mark Hamill in the role but somehow de-age him?
I think we're at the point, and I heard you guys talk about like all the deep fake technology and the de-aging stuff and whatnot. I think in certain cases, like, and again, you or Paula referenced Carrie Fisher's appearance in Rogue One.
Yeah.
To me, that might make sense because you are literally recreating a moment that already exists. You have the person there, and you're just trying to present them in a way that makes sense to show them in the state that the timeline goes to.
Right.
And I get that that's effectively kind of the same argument that's happening here, but it's not like if you did that with a Luke Skywalker specifically, for instance, it just like we never saw him in this period of his life. We don't need to recreate something that we already have reference for. Like Sebastian Stan specifically would fit the part very well if that's who's getting kicked around in fan circles. But he's also the good age for it. Like I don't need 60-some-year-old Mark Hamill de-aged to late 30s.
Right.
Why?
Okay.
I don't. And it's not going to pull me out. I'm not going to see. And you barely have to cast somebody who really closely resembles Mark Hamill. Just pick somebody who doesn't wildly unresemble him.
Yeah.
And it's fine. Just because we have this technology doesn't mean it has to be used all the time. You talk about distracting earlier, that would distract the hell out of me.
Oh, see, I think I'm the other way. Like, I really want, more or less because I think I want Mark Hamill to have something with Luke that, and, you know, he's, the PR part of it says likes Luke Ark and the Last Jedi and all that stuff, but you watch all the behind the scenes stuff, and when he was presented with that script, he did not really care for that. So he had one last hurrah as Luke. I'd love to see him just do something else with the character. Again, this is a part of Luke's life that I really want to know what's going on in this time period for him, and to just be able to have Mark come back and do something, I think would just make me giddy.
Sure, and keep in mind, it's not. I mean, it still wouldn't be him picking what he's doing with the character.
Well,
He'd
true.
be following someone else's writing and someone else's story, and he may not like it.
Yeah, fair. I don't know. I really enjoy what Luke's arc in The Last Jedi. A lot of people I think don't like Last Jedi. I am one of the defenders of Last Jedi. I really like that movie a lot.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe it's just because I'm such a fan of Luke. I just want more Luke. And it's sort of the same thing with Ahsoka. I think like there's certain actors or something that I've now associated with that character that it's hard for me to break that mold. And as much as I like I talked about it earlier, as much as I like Rosario as Ahsoka, not hearing Ashley Eckstein's voice for this role is really hard for me to swallow. And to the same point, if they cast someone else as Luke, I have such a connection to Luke and Mark Hamill that if someone else plays Luke, especially in live action, like animation or video games, someone else voices Luke, I can get around it because it still looks like Mark Hamill, and you just sort of buy it. Okay, they got a different voice actor for that. But live action specifically, if it's not Mark Hamill, I think it's going to throw me for a loop.
I guess I can appreciate that, but eventually, if this is something they ever want to keep doing, not to be cryptic, but eventually Mark Hamill will not be available to do that.
And if that's the case, fine. Like, Carrie Fisher can't be used, so if they have to find someone else to be Princess Leia for some sort of cameo or something, fine. But the fact that Mark Hamill is still here, we still have him. Like, I'd love to just give him more opportunities to play with this character.
Perhaps. I don't know if I would want to see him pulled back to a time period that long ago. And I know that doesn't give him a whole lot. Like, you get back to him for 2 seconds at the end of Force Awakens, and then he's the whole Last Jedi film. So there's not, like, unless you meet up with him, like, you don't really know how long he exiled himself. You don't know. I mean, I get the impression that Ben's rampage at Jedi school was not super recent, but not so long ago.
Yeah.
like maybe 10 years at the most. So if you go that route, then that takes you 10 years before Force Awakens, which is 15 years after where Mandalorian is.
Right.
So there's, it creates a time crunch that now you're like, okay, so how far between that 5-year and 20-year mark after Return of the Jedi are we going to try to insert Luke? And what is he going to be doing? Is he going to be running Jedi Academy? Is he like what?
Right.
I think it just gets too choppy, and I think the character could be done with it really cool, but I think the time is passing for him to do that.
Yeah. Yeah, I feel like my hope is like sort of my last gasp for this. Like I would not expect it to happen, but that's just my last like maybe like cross my fingers for it.
I can appreciate that.
So I want to spin back. So since we've sort of been talking about Jedis and stuff like that, again, sort of the whole reason we're trying to do this was just thoughts on Ahsoka and the most recent episodes and stuff like that. And we sort of talked about Ahsoka earlier, but the other question, I think we beat around the bush with it, but definitively, do you think we'll see Ahsoka again, whether it's in this show or a spin-off show? Are we going to see her again, or is she one and done episode?
I think, especially when they created something like Baby Yoda and kept it a secret, and then the reaction that the pop culture had to it immediately, they create, that was immediate. There was no planning, there was no build-up. It was like, and now it's in the world, and it's the biggest thing.
Yeah.
Ahsoka seems like something that they when did Clone Wars initially start? Like that was the first animated series, right?
Yes.
So when did that start?
Off the top of my head, I can't remember. I will have to look it up. I want to say because they started with a movie.
Okay.
Like they were making the show for Cartoon Network. This was like Cartoon Network was still around. George Lucas was heavily involved in the creation of the show with Dave Filoni. And they got to a point where the computer animation, George liked the tech so much and what they were doing, they took the first 3 episodes of the show and turned it into an 1.5-hour movie. And they released that in theaters.
Oh, I kind of remember that. Okay.
So Google's telling me the TV show started in 2008.
2008. Okay. So I wasn't quite sure, but I was kind of ballparking it around there. And let's just say, for sake of argument, I don't know. You don't have to confirm. Let's just say, Ahsoka is in those early episodes, or she shows up in season 2. Whatever. They had years to create the status in at least this fandom for what this character has become. There is no goddamn way this is the one and done. This, like, it seems like this, again, it was like lightning in a bottle with Baby Yoda, but now that you've waited this long to bring this character to live action, this thing is going to print your money. It is going to replace the U.S. Treasury, the U.S. Mint. This is it now. Disney makes their money by, they run the economy by making Ahsoka shit, and we pay them all for it.
Well, do you think we're going to see her more in season 2, season 3, another show? What's your best guess as to where she pops back up?
Since they're only doing 8 episodes this season as well. I mean, I guess there's a chance that they could. I can't imagine that they would not plan for it to think like, well, let's hedge our bet just in case the reaction is not that positive, and we already write these scripts and plan this production to have her show back up in episodes 7 or 8. I think, from what I can tell from all of you, they would be stupid to think that it would not go over wonderfully the first time.
Right.
So I think from a story perspective, I think they'd be, I guess it'd be mean to say they'd be stupid not to bring her back before the end of the season, especially if you'd have to wait a whole year to see her again. I think it'd be smart to, at the very least. And yeah, she'll probably pick back up like 1 or 2 more breadcrumbs before they would do anything outside of this with her.
Okay. And I want to loop back around to the fan casting point that Paula and I talked about. And I'm just curious, your thoughts on just fan casting in general. Do you think it's something you would approve of for show? Like, the whole process, again, the way Rosario got cast, and maybe it's just my perception of the way again, the way that I feel personally, my opinion, that I feel the internet influenced what I think is the story for the Rise of Skywalker. Like,
Okay.
to me, that story feels like it's such a reaction to what The Last Jedi was, everyone's complaints with The Last Jedi. It looks like
the whole movie is a message board response.
Right, correct.
Yeah.
So the fact that because of that movie, I feel like the quote-unquote fans or the internet people for Star Wars that go through that length to what seems like they've influenced the Rise of Skywalker as it is. Now you're giving them a little bit more influence on a casting of a specific, well-known and loved character for a show. I'm not sure how I feel about that. I'm very iffy. Paula seemed to be a lot more forgiving and happy with the decision that, like, fans can help choose a role.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know if I really want the fans to have that much, because it depends, to me, I guess, where the fans are coming from. I feel like Disney is listening to the quote-unquote fans, but it's just the mean, bitchy people on the internet.
It's the most vocal. It doesn't necessarily mean it's
Correct.
a representative population or percentage.
Yes. So that scares me if that's a trend that continues.
Sure.
So I guess just sort of your thoughts. I don't know. That's a long-winded
overall
explanation as to sort of where I'm at, but
I mean, there are so many other factors that go into somebody in that profession signing an agreement, a legal document that will pay them a certain amount of money, in some cases a very lot of money, to do a thing.
yeah.
I'm sure it comes down to, does their personality gel? Does someone at the studio just not get along with them? Have they wronged them in the past? Is one of the parties a big asshole? What is the negotiations on money? What is the availability on scheduling? Does the person just have any interest in it? Like, all those things are going to happen. I think it's not a bad thing if there is an excited fandom group that can bring forth a good suggestion. And if all of those other things align and it happens to come to fruition and it ends up executing well, that's great. There's nothing necessarily wrong with that. No, in my opinion, no creative, no producer and not just producer in the movie sense, just producer of stuff, of art, of paintings, of TV, of creation, producers. Even though they rely on the people who consume their things, they shouldn't always dictate their creations by what the people who may pay them for it. To me, there's a difference between getting commissioned and someone buying your shit.
Yes. Okay.
If fans want to pull their resources and either, let's say, a Fantasyland, we're gonna kickstart this Star Wars short movie that we want you to make, and guess what, Disney, we are going to front the money for you.
Yeah.
And if you're willing to make it and actually be the thing, the resource that manifests it and wills it into reality, that is commissioning.
Yeah.
Right? That is different than I went into an art gallery or I decided to go buy a movie ticket and I was a customer.
Yeah.
That is different. And that is not what should happen. That is not necessarily those people should not, the model should not become that.
Right.
In my opinion.
And I think part of it is to me, like, there's a specific Vanity Fair article where Dave Filoni and Rosario are interviewed with, the debut of Ahsoka, and part of the conversation is how Rosario got the role, which, again, goes through that whole fan casting chain of events where the picture went up online, caught the attention of Rosario, she's sharing it and sort of campaigning for it. It caught the attention of Dave Filoni that way. Dave Filoni's, if he's asked, who would you put in the role? His first thought is Rosario Dawson. Relays that information to Jon Favreau. Jon Favreau says, I know Rosario Dawson.
Sure.
And for more or less, it seems like she was the one and only pick for Ahsoka. I feel like there's something to be said for a casting process of like, hey, we're going to audition for this role and find the best person that fits that role. But at the same time, you could argue movies do the same thing, where someone writes a role for a movie or a TV show with a specific actor in mind and don't even shop it around to anybody else. So the same thing, I guess, could apply, but I guess in the in the scenario where the writer is thinking of a specific actor, that's the creative, the person in charge of the creativity for the thing.
Yep.
Is the one choosing who should play the character they're creating.
Sure.
This is Dave's character creation, but the internet has chosen who will play that character.
And I can sense and appreciate your trepidation on that, but I would not already conclude that that is what happened. I don't think it's as I can, like I said, I can appreciate your trepidation for the industry moving that way, because if the creators just want to get paid and enough people that they're seeing are saying a similar thing, and they think if we do that thing, they're more apt to give us their money if we just make it for them.
It's the lowest common denominator thing. Like, we have seen
I
enough people say
that.
they like this person, so let's just use that person. Regardless of how they fit with the role, they just sort of plug and play type of thing.
Right. And so, again, that leads you down two paths. Number one, if that were to happen, is the person, in this case, selected to do the role, did they do it well? And were they a good fit regardless of how it came about?
Yeah.
In the case like Rosario, if I mean, there's been plenty of instances where people have even the people themselves, like the actors who were interested in roles, have tried to get public, interest and campaigns going to, quote, petition for a role, and they don't get it.
Right.
And I can guarantee that you might be able to think of one or two off the top of your head, but there's hundreds or at least dozens of high profile people who have done that you don't ever know about, or that you forgot about.
Right.
So I would not yet assume that that is what happened in this case, that is already steamrolling the industry, but I can appreciate the worry that people who really know the least or have the best creative inclinations and instincts should not be dictating the creative process.
Right. And again, I want to reiterate, I don't have a problem with Rosario Dawson in the role. Yeah. I don't want to seem like I'm getting very defensive because I don't like what she did. I think she did an excellent job. I just think it's like my personal hurdle that I just have to get used to seeing her in this role when I'm so used to the animated version and Ashley Eckstein and stuff like that. That's more my personal bias maybe than what Rosario did with the role and for the show and stuff like that. So I just want to put that on Front Street.
Yeah, no worries. I mean, some things I'll mention real quick about Ahsoka in general. Like I said, her appearance looked really well. The contrast of the way that they designed the set and the environment she would be in was probably deliberate and a really good way to emphasize the visual aspects of her.
Yeah, I think you and I were texting about that when we were sort of talking about this episode. And the way her lightsabers cut through everything and stuff like that, yeah.
And you have the contrast of her orange skin against the drab of the burned and desolate forest, as well as the gray stone of this town and all that. Good production choices, honestly.
I just want to take another moment to praise Dave Filoni and his direction for the show because he's doing a fantastic job.
It was well done. Yeah, I always expect something I wrote down. I actually said I always expect episodes to be like 10 to 15 minutes longer than they are. And I think if they did that, I don't know if it's like cut down in the editing process or if they make the show so tight that they're like, no, that 40 or 45 minutes, that is all we wanted to give you. I feel they could actually benefit on many of these episodes by going another 10 or 15 minutes. Yeah. To be honest.
Saving it for the finale.
That's just a feeling, a critique, an opinion. Something that I wanted to run by you that I said to Sarah, I'm like, I think I remember hearing a Star Wars thing. And, going back to how we opened, that like you guys do these other episodes and I do listen, and I think some of it I might have retained. Am I correct in that the reason that at least one of her sabers is white is because she uncorrupted a previously corrupted
Kyber crystal.
Kyber crystal that like it was previously a red saber, and that's how they become white sabers?
I'll be honest, that's a part of lore that I am not familiar with. I know there is an Ahsoka book that I at some point I think I bought the audiobook, and I'm really mad at myself for not listening to it. Mm-hmm. Which maybe that explanation is in there. But I'm pretty sure Bradley and Paula have both read that book, so maybe that piece of lore came from one of them.
Okay, could have.
Maybe
I know
they've got some source that I
I'm
haven't
not
heard
creative
before.
enough to make that up on my own, so I think I heard it somewhere. I don't recall where.
Because the lore for the kyber crystals too, that's how they get red. Is like the dark side does something with the crystal to make it bleed, and that's why the color changes to red. So, and there could be a way to do the reverse, like you're saying. I just off the top of my head, I don't remember that at all. But again, I'm not saying it didn't happen. But
well, then I'll rely on our other team experts to see if I just am completely wrong on that and misremember. Other things that real quick I wrote down listening to your guys' discussion was just to give credit to the people involved. During your chat, you guys couldn't grab the names off the top of your head of the actress or the character who played the like marshal in that town.
Yeah.
Just to give credit where it's due, the actress is Diana Lee Ina Santo, and her character was Morgan Elsbeth.
Yeah, we looked it up after we recorded because that's when we remembered to finally stop and look it up. But yeah, thank you for giving the name out. Surely,
because she was interesting to watch too. I wanted to know way more about her deal. And then the last question I had that I wrote down was, you guys had brought up that at the end of the episode, Ahsoka tells Mando to take him to like a planet or a place where like the original Jedi Temple is. Am I wrong? Is that not the place that gets blown up in Rogue One, where Forrest Whitaker is? Is that not the same Jedi Temple?
Was the name of the temple or planet where Forrest Whitaker was.
Oh, okay. So that temple is different than the one that Ahsoka's referencing somewhere?
From what I understand, I think there's basically Jedi temples scattered and hidden all over the galaxy.
Okay.
The only way you can get into them and access them is with the Force.
Okay.
So nobody can just stumble upon a Jedi temple. Although I guess maybe I'm already contradicting myself because in Rogue One, the Empire is raiding a Jedi temple for the kyber crystals. They obviously didn't use the Force to get in there, so I don't know how they opened it to get in, but unless they blew their way in or something like that. But
yeah, I mean, you can use the Force or dynamite.
Yeah, because I was always under the impression that the temples are not just out there for the public to see; they're more hidden and obscure, and you have to either feel them through the Force to find them, or at the very least use the Force to open them.
Gotcha.
From
thoughts that I had from the previous discussion, that goes through everything I had. So whatever else you want to pick my brain about.
I mean, I think we covered all the bullet points I did, and we covered a lot more of like general Star Wars stuff than I really thought we would for this conversation, which is fine. I enjoyed. It's fun to me to talk to you because you have such a general sort of knowledge of Star Wars in general that it's nice to hear what you pick up on, and you know, if there's anything you need clarification for too. Like that's, where Paul and I and Mike and everybody else that follows this kind of stuff comes in to try to get you through it. So at least I'm happy to hear that, at least for The Mandalorian, you don't need us as much. Like it's enough for you to just absorb it and get into it and like it and enjoy it.
I mean, that's the thing. I think so. Now, I mean, my as we talked about so much in the middle, my perception is I might think I understand what's going on, but there might be a bunch of this stuff that's in plain view that I might be missing that would actually tell a different story. Like it's not just an Easter egg, it actually explains something that like would mean that my impression of important events or significance in things is very different. But yeah. In what I think I understand, I don't feel lost.
Okay. That's
that makes sense.
Good as we're going to take right now.
Yeah.
And I think that's probably as good of a segue as any to loop back around to our beginning question. Yeah. So given all the stuff we talked about, given the stuff you've seen so far, and again, posing Paula's question to you second time, has your exposure to The Mandalorian and all these cameos and Star Wars in general interested you at all into diving into more Star Wars Expanded Universe shows or lore?
Almost.
It's on the tip of your tongue. We're just on the edge.
It kind of. I mean, and you guys did mention it in your discussion that it's a big commitment.
Yes.
To get like I'm looking at it right now, like Star Wars, The Clone Wars, 133 episodes. Even if it's like a half an hour animated show without commercials, that's a lot to get through.
I think Paul and I talked about this off air. If you're not bringing it up, we probably didn't talk about it in the recording, but The Clone Wars has not only is it 7 seasons and 100 some episodes to look at, if you want to watch it correctly, they're not in order. So you have to give someone a list that gives you the season number and episode number, and you have to go down the list.
Why did they air it that way?
The one thing I've heard someone describe is like the one thing George Lucas loved more than Star Wars was prequel Star Wars.
Okay.
Like, meaning they'd be in the middle of a season, and he'd be like, you know what, remember that character? I have this idea for a story. Let's just put it in there.
Okay,
So
and
literally
he
in the middle of a
highly
season,
involved and instrumental in production of Clone Wars.
I think yes, and
Okay.
I think a lot of it too is like they just come up with a story idea, and instead of trying to figure out how to make it work in the continuity of what's going on, they just throw it in there. So like you'll be seeing characters that have died in previous episodes just pop up for one random episode somewhere in the middle of the season.
Oh, I see.
And if you're
Okay.
paying attention, that shouldn't work that way. But
So you might need to watch like season 1, episode 11 first,
yes,
and then go to 2, 3, 4, and then grab number 8.
it gets definitely
okay.
better as you go through the seasons. But the first half of that show,
Yeah.
mostly happens in order. The first chunk of it, you're jumping around all over the place, and then there's a little bit like 1 or 2 episodes here and there. And I actually saw Andy tweet about it on Twitter because the chronological order for Clone Wars is on StarWars.com. It's on the official website. They give you the order in which to watch it in. All of these episodes are on Disney Plus.
Yeah.
And again, Andy tweeted this, so I can't take credit for this idea. I love the idea, and I'm hoping they do it. But why not put the episodes in chronological order on Disney Plus?
They absolutely, I mean, given what you're telling me, they should. They, like, on the Marvel page, they gave you an option to watch a timeline version of the MCU.
Right. So I don't think it's out of the realm of possibilities. They just have to go off the list they already have on StarWars.com and just put the episodes in that order.
Oh, okay. And so and StarWars.com is like the official Disney-owned Star Wars website.
Yes.
Okay, so
Yes.
it's not even like, well, fans just know about this. It's the Machete order. It's this or
Yes.
that. It's that we are overseeing.
Yes.
A
As
version of
Star
this.
Wars, we are telling you how to watch Star Wars. So this
Yes,
is
that
the
seems like
official
that would
timeline of the
Be
show.
intelligent.
So
Yeah.
that's sort of, again, her and I talked off the air that like that's the other jump the shark moment. Not only is it 7 seasons, but it's 7 seasons you have to watch in this specific order to watch them correctly. And suddenly when you tell someone you have to go off this list to watch a show, they're like, nope, I'm not. That's too much effort. I'm not going to do that.
Not necessarily too much effort, but 133 episodes of something dealing with that, perhaps. So I just did the quick dirty math. So between the two shows, between Rebels and Clone Wars, there are 209 episodes between those two shows. If it's 22 minutes apiece, that is 4,600 minutes of viewing time, which is 76 hours.
So
That's a lot of commitment.
wait, because you just like binged through 7 seasons of Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. at 45 minutes a pop.
Mm-hmm.
So that's gonna yeah. What's the timetable for that one? If you can do some quick and dirty math on that, because some of those because that's like full. No, you know what? Because some of those the seasons at the end.
Season 6 and 7 are only
shorter.
like halvesies-ish.
Because I was thinking those are full 22 episode seasons, but those are shorter.
Well, I mean, yeah, but it also took me till that show was about over to decide to get into it. Like, since I
Right.
didn't jump in at the beginning, it took me 7 years to finally agree to do it.
But I'm
Like,
just thinking,
and it was
if the
it
time
was a big
commitment is
thing.
the issue, I feel like the times are somewhat comparable.
they're comparable, and Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. was a goddamn lot of time. Just because I did it doesn't mean it was short. It still
Right.
took months and months. So I one thing I considered doing after getting done with Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. finally was, maybe I'll go back and watch Arrow. I never did. I've only
Oh.
really watched The Flash. Maybe I'll try Supergirl or some of the CW shows. But it's the same thing. Like,
Yeah.
Sarah has been asking me to watch Buffy for years, and I'm like, there's just so much.
Right.
It's so yeah. Just because I've done a time-consuming thing once doesn't mean that the same time-consuming stuff is just as easy to continue doing over and over.
Well, to be fair, I mean, these series are not getting extended. Like Clone Wars is done, Rebels is done, So
Mm-hmm. You
there's
just know
not
what the end point is.
right. So at least there's that to look forward to.
That is true.
So I'm sure, between Paul and I, we're going to revisit this question for you again and again. You haven't officially written us off yet. We're still going to bug you. Not all the time, but we'll bug you periodically.
That is fine. Yeah, I mean, some more of these things that they've grabbed in the last couple episodes of this show specifically, if they're compelling enough. Like I said, honestly, Ahsoka, and specifically not even the mention of that Admiral Thrawn person, but specifically something about the backstory or some kind of extended story about Morgan Elsbeth. Like, I don't know if is this the first time that character has ever existed?
As far as I know, she is brand new. I don't remember seeing her in any of the other Star Wars lore that I know of.
Mm-hmm.
She's definitely not in the animated series.
Gotcha. It depends. If they can, for me personally, if they just happen to throw a couple of additional compelling nuggets in that grab my attention enough, it's possible.
And I think
it's still a big lift to undertake, though.
My push for the animated shows is definitely all character driven. I think you get some fantastic character stuff in a cartoon. I think Ahsoka is a big draw for the Clone Wars specifically. You get some of the best Anakin stuff in Clone Wars. You don't see a lot of his character development in the movies because there's just not time for it.
Okay.
But there's 7 seasons of him in the show, and you get a lot there. And they flesh him out that much more. Even especially with him and Obi-Wan, their relationship is so much better in the cartoon than it was in the movies.
Is the version way better than the annoying, bitchy, rapey part of him that was in Attack of the Clones?
Yes. That's definitely low point for Anakin Skywalker. And then same with Rebels. I think Rebels, it has to do with the larger galactic conflict, and there definitely Easter eggs and some cameos in that show for the larger galactic universe, and it's the seeds of the rebellion and stuff. But the main characters in that show and their relationship is, I think, what drives that show for me, and that's what hooks me.
Mm-hmm.
So if you're going into it just wanting more Star Wars lore, or if you think that's the majority of the show, I don't want to sell you short that there's some of that stuff in there, but it's definitely all the character stuff that's in those shows are fantastic.
Okay, like I said, it's possible. I haven't completely rolled it out, and these little bumps recently have, nudged it one more peg forward.
Fair enough. That's better than I can hope for. And Josh, I want to give you a heads up too that we have officially talked longer than Paula and I have talked for this. So we have talked more Star Wars than Paula and I have talked Star Wars.
Well, I think it's also, I don't necessarily think that's an accolade on either of our parts, especially mine. I think it's easier to discuss, you two would be quasi almost preaching to the choir more. You can inform me about a lot more that I don't know, rather than with you two, you could go on a 5-minute tangent and she says, yeah, I know.
Right. Well, true. There's a little bit more shorthand there.
Yeah.
All right. So I'm sure we will revisit The Mandalorian. Like I said, I was trying to get this recorded at least before we watched any more episodes. So we're recording this on Friday. A new Mando episode dropped today. So I'm chomping at the bit to finish this and go watch whatever is out there today.
I have 3 more topics I can bring up.
Don't you dare. But yeah, so we will definitely, by the time this comes out and is released and you're listening to it, another episode or 2 will probably have come out for Mando by the time you get around to this, whether you listen to it right when it comes out or, a week later or something like that. But so we will not be talking about stuff you've probably already seen. We will come back to that. For all the talking points that The Mandalorian gives us, I feel like we owe it to ourselves, especially try to get the full crew back together for talking about season 2 as a whole. So once season 2 wraps, I will try to get everybody together. We'll do a whole Mando episode review type of thing, or a season review type of thing, where we just talk about the season 2 of Mando and what we think, and what other revelations that have happened in these last 3 episodes, and summarize it there. I think that'll be a good discussion too. Final thoughts for anything, Josh?
No, I don't think so. I think, to echo sort of where we started, I hope that the last couple episodes of the season tighten up as far as the story goes.
Yeah.
And as it stops becoming as much of side quest the show, and some of the more central needs and purposes are served.
Yeah.
Maybe keep my fingers crossed there.
Yeah, I'm expecting some other big cameos and revelations. At the rate that they've been dishing them out this season, I'm expecting some other big shit to happen. Because they name drop Grand Admiral Thrawn, if we see Grand Admiral Thrawn in live action, that will also explode my face. I will not be able to handle myself for at least a day. So we'll see if we have that to talk about when we come back to this. So if you've enjoyed the show, please support us. Leave a 5-star rating and review. Give us a share on social media. Make sure you follow or subscribe to keep up with the show. We are on Spotify, iTunes, Google, Anchor, Stitcher. Hopefully anywhere you find a podcast, you can find us. As always, you can find us on Facebook. Search Bry Guy into Super Friends or go to facebook.com/BryGuySuperFriends. You can leave us questions, comments, topic suggestions, any Mandalorian talk you want to do. Just throw it up there. We'll talk to you. Try to email us, bryguysuperfriends@gmail.com. Email is valid. I've checked it recently just to make sure it's still up there and working. It's working. I won't check it, but it's there. You can tweet us at BGSuperFriends on Twitter. Those we'll see. Those we'll get back to you. Feel free to follow me on Twitch at Jedi Bry Guy on there. Whenever we decide to do another live show for the podcast, we will do it there. We've done 2 of them so far, few and far between. We were trying to do 1 a month, but I feel like it's getting extended every time we try to do it. So we just got to find a good topic to get up there and put our nice faces in front of you for a change, and you can watch us do this live. But yeah, follow me there. You can always get the email alert whenever we go live for that, or any gameplay that I end up wanting to share there. But that's it for what I billed as a mini Mando episode that is now 2.5 hours long, probably. So it's not so many, but it's still Mando. On behalf of Paula, Josh, and myself, thank you for listening, and we'll talk to you next time.